Yes,
Ready?
yes,
You
ma'am.
turned the audio off.
It's on now.
Okay, okay.
Good.
Good now.
Check, check.
Good.
I want to call welcome everyone to our September 19th, 2023 work session. Thanks everyone for coming out. We have 3 items on our agenda. First, wanted to say real quick, if you would please keep the mayor's family in your thoughts and prayers if they have had a loss in their family. That's why he's not here tonight. And with that, we will start into our agenda. Our first item is the Rolesville Rural Fire Department and Town of Rolesville Unification Resolution, and our town manager will start that off.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Vilga and Commissioners. Tonight we are to review the submittal from the Rolesville Rural Fire District on their resolution response. And also joining me will be Greg Grayson, and Greg has been very gracious to help put together some PowerPoint that just came in today, so you do not have these, but I hope they will guide your conversation tonight. That was on what was presented to us over the summer in response to the resolutions that were adopted from both boards. So just a reminder, and Greg, I'll take this part and then I'm going to let you kind of jump into the points. Just to remind you that back last year, you approved a resolution of intent to move towards an agreement for unification with the Rolesville Rural Fire District. You did one resolution, and 2 weeks prior to that, the fire district did a different resolution that pretty much mirrored yours. And you both adopted that. They amended their resolution and made some amendments, and when it came to you, you kept those amendments in your resolution. Right. We can talk about that further. And so since then, the fire district has kind of paused on the unification effort and has discussed how they would like to have one resolution of mutual terms, not separate terms, because we made some amendments to their amendments, and that they would like to have that considered by you all. So they did submit a draft resolution to you. I gave it to you as is, so you have that in your packet, and we can refer to that if we need to during this presentation. But we've kind of just been ready to move forward on this issue because now the new unification date proposed by the Rural Fire District is July 1, 2025. And again, in order to meet that date, we both need to kind of come to terms with an agreement sometime in a fair amount of advance time, and Greg could answer his opinion on how far out, so that we could all plan together how that unification would proceed July 1 of 2025. So with that, I'm going to let Greg kind of step in here, help guide this conversation. At the end of the conversation, I think both Greg and I, and to a certain degree Dave, would like to see where the board stands on this effort. And if you are ready to continue, you would provide us some input on their modifications that they've provided, whether you agree with them or whether you want to amend them or modify them. And then we would work back on a resolution to see if we can get mutually together again with the rural fire district. So does that make sense as far as background and reminder where we are today?
Yes, sir.
Does.
Okay, so with that, Greg, come on up and I'll join you as needed.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you here tonight, and thank you for the good work that you're doing for the people of Rolesville. Certainly appreciate your dedicated public service. I'm going to go through some of the components of the proposal back from Rolesville Rural Fire and offer some perspective. These are the same pieces that Mr. Arnold put in the letter to you. We just separate them so we could speak with them one by one tonight and take a look at those here for you. So again, as he noted, ideally, you want to have one resolution, and that certainly was attempted about a year ago, but there were some things that were different, and I think those will show up in the points here tonight. And plus, there have been some changes just in the environment of changes. For example, some things that were debt, there was debt before, now there isn't, some changes like that, and some tweaks and modifications. So we'll take a look at each of those. But we do want to note, that both have approved a resolution, and that's good progress. And I think we need to certainly keep that in mind, that taking that step of that resolution is saying this is our intent, this is our plan, and this is where we want to move forward to. Both organizations have done that. There's some differences that obviously need to be resolved, and having feedback from you will help to determine how do we recraft a new resolution to move forward. So since the original resolution came out, as I said before, things have changed a little bit. So the fire department really wants to go back and have one document, and they'd really like to have that signed by not only the town board, but the board of directors. They'd like to have their desires to have one document. I've spoken to the chief and their board president, and that's really what they'd like to do, is have one document that both governing boards sign, or they're very much in alignment. So they do want to go back to that one joint resolution. And our session here tonight is really to talk about those changes. What are the things that they have brought forward? I think in the document that you have that says what is of interest to us now in September of 2023. It's important to kind of take this in context. So to frame this for you, this initial resolution does give staff guidance. These are the things that we need to work on. It also demonstrates intent. This is our intent to move forward in our tentative commitment. It is not a legal and binding document, because that comes later in a type of consolidation agreement. A consolidation agreement in these situations is where it is very specific and it's very definitive. And your legal representation would look at that as well as fire department's legal representation. So that's the true binding agreement. But the resolution is a preliminary agreement to help us move forward. So keep that in mind. A resolution determines an intent, and also those things that are most important to the organizations. When you look at the Rolesville Rural Fire's document they have sent back to you, there are some minor changes that have occurred, as I said earlier, that are really just adjustments that happen within a year. They give some examples about, we had in there a fire station evaluation. Well, that's been completed, so that's no longer prevalent. They've had some debt that they have retired, so that's no longer prevalent. So some items are just minor and adjustments, and should be made if you're making a new document to bring it up to date. There were 6 notable items that are highlighted, and those are the ones we'll talk with you about and make sure you have a good awareness of them. And if you have an opinion or direction that you can offer, then that's very helpful too, as we try to keep this moving in a positive direction. So our focus is going to be on these 6 particular items here tonight. The first of these is a change of date. Originally, it was July 1, 2024, and the department is asking for that to be adjusted to 25. Those type of changes really need to be at the beginning of a fiscal year, so they're asking to push that to 2025. We really don't see a concern from as your consultant perspective. That's really not a concern. There's a lot of work still needs to be done. We've done a lot of work this year towards that final agreement, and especially just until recent months. But we did quite a bit of work on that. It just needs to continue. There's a lot of ground you have to cover in these types of processes. So we really see no concern with that 2024 shift to a 2025. There's quite a bit of ground, again, that needs to be covered during that period of time. It really presents no significant concerns, but it is a significant change. And so we want to make sure that you know that that's moving forward to 2025 at their request, if that's agreeable to you. So I can stop with each of these and ask if you have any concerns or comments about that.
Yes, I have a question about number 2, about the part-time employees being treated as for the retirement system.
Okay, well, let's talk about number 2 then. So number 2, they added, in the original language, it referred to full-time employees. It did not include part-time. Right now, there are some firefighters that work part-time, fill in for when people are out and help with staffing. And there are 2 employees that are part-time that work for the fire department today. Their administrative assistant and their fire chief. So those are currently part-time employees. So they're asking to include the part-time employees to be recognized as employees on the date of merger and being able to participate in the retirement system. And what the process is, North Carolina Local Government Employee Retirement System. And so that's a big driver for what helped bring this forward to be an issue to be looked at, getting the firefighters able to participate in the ELGER system. We call it ELGERS for the Local Government Retirement System. So the biggest issue here, I think, to be aware of is that in order to participate in ELGERS, that part-time person has to work more than 1,000 hours a year. If you don't work more than 1,000 hours a year, it's really a moot point because you don't qualify to be part of the ELGERS program. But if you did work more than that, then there are provisions that part-time employees can be, and from a state perspective, can be members of ELGERS, but you have to work more than the 1,000 hours per year. Retirees, as an example, can't come back and work more than 1,000 hours, or they put their retirement in jeopardy by doing that. So the 1,000 hour is a threshold that ELGERS uses, really across the board. So the language that the fire department asked for, where the original language said and full-time employees, which you may be looking at 12, 13 employees full-time, they've asked to include part-time. And that would be comprised of some firefighters that work part-time to help fill in, and the 2 personnel that are more consistent.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's see if you have any other questions on that item.
Does that also include not only receiving retirement, but like medical, dental?
That would be, I'd have to defer to your town program on that. The piece that I think they were really focused on in that section where they pulled it in was a focus on the ELGERS system. And so I can speak to the ELGERS, but how that would mesh with your town benefits for part-time employees, I'd really have to defer to the manager on that.
So I seem to recall that if you hit 20 hours, you're eligible for some level of benefits over, health partial. If you're over 30 hours, it's full, considered full. So that would be I don't know what the number of hours annually that is, but that would be the kind of the level as a town employee. 20 is 1,000. So 20 is 1,000.
And then we would have to figure out how that would fit and where they would fall in employment. Because I don't know. So how would that look?
So if I heard Greg correctly, 1,000 hours is 20 hours a week. So if an employee works, or part-time employee works over 20 or over, they'd be eligible for the retirement system at some level, for some level of benefits, including health insurance and such.
I think I'm thinking more along of the lines of one being an administrative assistant.
Fire chief.
So the administrative assistant, given what we already have at the town, how would that transition in? I guess that's my question. I guess that's something that would need to be thought about.
Yeah, I think actually we have a point on that. The next one of the points, don't we? Or is it
Yeah, that's
about
a good
those two?
question.
We have one on those 2 individuals.
Yeah, so we'll get to that one. Yep.
So I have a question about number 2
Okay.
as well. So for part-time employees, you indicated some firefighters may come in and out of part-time status, and the 2 that we were discussing earlier. So is there a limit? Because if I'm a part-time firefighter and I'm like, oh, I could be eligible for this, what qualifies me to become a part-time employee? And then when I think about sharing cost, how do we manage that? Because if I'm part-time and I'm like, hey, I could be qualified for the retirement system, why not come in? So does that take us from 2 or 3 or 4 employees to 25? How does that work?
I don't seem to recall how many they have that make 1,000 hours or more.
I
So
want to say that approximately 7, I believe.
Currently.
Less than 10 currently as firefighters. So that's, less than that number. So there's several ways to manage that. One, you have a budget, and the town has a budget, the county has a budget.
Right.
in your system here, you're actually in a much better place than many counties, but you have a cost share agreement. So those things in the budget have to be agreed upon by the town and also by the county. So the county has some guidelines and stipulations that they hold all the departments to, and where there is a joint municipal and county department, then obviously those two have to work together. You know, you can't have different, it's not effective to have different rules for municipal than the county. So the two come together because you're dependent upon that county cost share model to help fund the operation. So again, without getting, having those specifics, we would say that there are some controls with that relative to the county and municipal budgeting process.
Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
that just doesn't seem called out. So like I said, that would look real attractive to me if I'm a part-time employee not eligible for retirement yet. So I think that needs to be called out. It's no different than in companies where you explain what's a contractor, what's full-time, what's part-time, how do you become part-time. I think that needs to be spelled out
Okay.
a little more
Understood.
clear.
The impetus behind that was, I think, the connection to the retirement system, and it's all administered by the state treasurer, and those rules are very firm and rigid, so, but you can have part-timers that are a part of that system, but obviously you've got to be able to fund them.
All right, that's my concern, kind of balancing that out. And if we're not addressing that, I don't want to, 2 years
There's-
from now, it may be a different
Sure.
story.
There's another piece where they specifically ask for the fire chief and the administrative assistant. So those are asked for specifically by name.
Okay,
This one was more about just adding part-time employees.
part-time people, gotcha.
And it's very typical, that process of hiring some part-time firefighters to help with staffing when people are on sick, vacation, that's very typical, and your department does that, and so does most,
Sure.
certainly of this size.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It's all a matter of how much they
Right.
work, right?
Exactly.
Okay, any other concerns around number 2?
No, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. So number 3, your adopted resolution outlined a process to hire a full-time fire chief and the town to lead that process. Now, again, your resolution was all focused around 2024, which is less than a year from now, so that was coming up pretty soon. The fire department has proposed that the private nonprofit will lead the full-time fire chief hiring. They understand the need and certainly support the full-time fire chief. We've been talking about the fire chief being part-time today, so they understand that. But in lieu of the town leading that process, their vision is that the fire department would lead that process. So I would also flag to you, though, that the timeline has shifted for that. If you accept number 1, it's shifted from 2024 to 2025. So that gives some context about that situation too. But that is something you do need to plan for, prepare for. But that is a request they have made that we would certainly say, yeah, that's a significant change. You're not saying that in your resolution the fire department was going to be involved, but the decision was led and final decision by the town. They're proposing the opposite of that the fire department make the decision, hopefully inclusive of town leadership, but that they would ultimately make the decision for their full-time fire chief at the time to be in place by the time of merger.
I have 2 things.
Yeah, I got
I want to go back to number 1 first,
Okay.
please. So number 1, the unification date, if it is July 2025, taking into consideration the amount of whatever has been done thus far, when does work really need to get started on?
Well, this process certainly takes a year. I think I'd be, way too aggressive to say it didn't take a year. And so I think that's really the route we would initially started with the 2024 date. More time is needed. We have covered quite a bit of ground. There's a number of items that have been looked at and addressed, particularly around some of the financial and human resources piece. Your staff's done a great job with that. We have tried to help facilitate that process, but there's been a lot of work already accomplished. So it's not a start from zero. There's been a lot of work up through really late spring of this year. There was a lot of work into that piece, And so it's not from zero, but it's you know, to fairness to say a year process.
Okay, now,
That is not an unreasonable change, I would say, to move to 2025.
since 24 is like,
Knocking on our door, yeah.
okay, so on number 3, my only concern with that, well, one of my concerns with that, is that the town, I see the town's need in having a very active and forefront say in who the fire chief is going to be, because that person is going to be a fire chief, a town employee. And they have to be able to work well with Kelly and our staff. So I think that one I have a little bit of a problem with. I know that they have the know-how, the expertise, and their input is vital in this search and in this decision. But as far as them having the final call, that one doesn't sit well with me, for those reasons that I stated.
Any other thoughts or questions around that item number 3?
You done, April? Okay. So I have concern on number 3. One, when I read this, and maybe I'm reading way too much into this, but it says that the private nonprofit, so is there an identified company that's going to do it versus
Well, the fire
saying
department is a private nonprofit organization. They're a 501c3 organization.
Right, but it says has now proposed that the private nonprofit, so they're saying themselves they will do it, or they're hiring a nonprofit to do it?
No, they themselves want to
Make that decision.
lead the fire chief hiring process.
Okay.
Previously, the town was going to lead the process. The fire department's requesting that they lead the process.
So I was reading that a little wrong, because I was
Sorry.
thinking they were going to engage another organization.
Not to my understanding.
Yet this does not feel inclusive. If we are coming together and unifying, which they asked to do, and we know that there's a necessity to do it, I do think it needs to be a partnership. And there needs to be something worked out so that we're working together. This feels very one-sided. And to April's point, I mean, you've got to collaborate with the staff that's here. So for us to be completely left out, I don't think that is the right approach.
What is lead? What does that mean?
They did not define that. It was, I think it was an intent to shift the lead from the town to the fire department. They haven't defined, that I've been a part of, define what that means. But clearly the original resolution said the town will lead this. They're saying we would like the fire department to lead it. There was nothing in that document that excluded, but it didn't specifically include.
And in your expertise and experience, what have you seen towns do?
Well, everyone would I think, do better when you make decisions collectively.
Yeah, together.
I will say, I think that, you know, that's a workable system, but there should be, everybody should be at the table.
Right. Thank you for that.
That's just an opinion.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Other questions or comments around item 3? And I think those are meaningful comments to be able to help reconstruct something that has the proper balance, healthy balance there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that doing it this way, you're going to come in just feeling like two groups still fighting against each other. And I don't think that's not going to work out. I mean, it has to be you might not have a unanimous decision over both boards, but I feel like if both boards are involved, that makes more sense.
So I'm hearing from you that the piece of inclusion, the piece of involvement from everyone is essential and important. And while you may be open to who's in lead, there needs to be a healthy balance of representation. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree.
Number 4 has been a point of concern along the way as well. The town's adopted original resolution, had movement of all items of value, including real property, most of the fire apparatus, all the frontline fire apparatus, excluding historical equipment, to transfer to the town as an asset. The department has proposed to maintain ownership of one piece of their real property on Burlington Mills Road for use by them as a 501c3. The department envisions transitioning from being a 501c3 fire department to being more of a 501c3 foundation group, and maintain the historical equipment of the trucks that have been with the department for many, many years, help to support the fire department's operations and those type things, and we have seen that in other organizations as well. The change here is to say, instead of all of those different pieces of property that they own property downtown, they own some property out Pierce's Road, they own this property on Burlington Mills. This particular one would stay with the 501c3 at their request.
So the question I have about that is, what kind of a disadvantage does that put us with not having a property out in that area?
Again, their request is to keep it as 501c3 from a fire protection perspective, based upon the fire station location analysis that you did some years back. That was not a needed location in the immediate future.
Okay.
Again, you are growing fast. There hasn't been a rerun of all that data, but I would say to you that it's very close to another fire station. And Wake County looks at any station that is built that they help fund through cost share, and they're not going to fund anything that is not a needed station and improves the level of service. So that's the county's position in those cost share agreements. And so, situation certainly could change, but at this point, I don't see that as a void that's creating for you in the immediate future or foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you.
So is that because there's one right there in Wake Forest?
Wake Forest.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the proximity. The only concern I have with this is, and I don't know if you can answer this question, you might have to go to staff, but did the town help secure these properties? Was that town dollars that helped secure those properties? Because to me, those, if so, those are taxpayer dollars. And to take that and turn it into a 501c3, a private 501c3, feels a little weird. I won't say illegal, but feels a little weird.
I don't think I can't say that they wouldn't have used
Some
your
funding.
cost share to help purchase those at some point in time. I don't know the exact amount or anything that we've never engaged, we never had that question, have we, in our 18 months to talk about this? No. So I suspect there's a chance that some of our town monies may have been spent on that because of the cost share, and they used that, but I don't have a recall of specifically a yes or no on that.
And I think the public deserves to know that, because before you make a decision to turn it into a private, I know why they want to do it. I commend them for wanting to do that preservation. But if you're using taxpayer money for that, to me, you shouldn't have a private right to just make that decision to take those funds and use it towards that land. So that would be a question I think needs to be addressed.
I will address that in these situations with private nonprofit corporations becoming part of the municipality. It is not unusual that some assets may remain with that original 501c3 organization. Okay. They may change their name, they may change their function or purpose, but some type of asset it may stay with that organization. That is not unusual in North Carolina for that to happen. It may not be desirable by you as commissioners, but having some asset remain with that is not, out of the realm.
Right, but to keep it clean. So if the land, and I don't know what the percentages are, I don't know the cost. So say the town invested $100,000 in securing that land, right? Those are public dollars, right? Mm-hmm. To me, that money should be pulled back into our budget if they're going to keep it that way. That way it keeps it clean, we're done with it.
So ensuring that whatever Rolesville dollars helped purchase that, and we'd have to go back and look at the budgeting and what the county's cost share was at that time.
Right.
But I hear you saying whatever public dollars was used for that property should be, doing this is fine, but those public dollars should be returned back to town of Rolesville.
Unless it comes through here and it comes to a public hearing. I mean, I think that's fair to the public because it's the public's money. It's not our money to say, sure, you can take that money.
Understood.
And it may be a moot point, like you said earlier, because there may have been no funding towards it. I don't know that answer.
And I certainly don't at this point. We can find out.
Okay, excellent. Excellent, thank you.
Other comments or questions around item 4?
Ready for 5.
There are no other exclusions that they've asked for, just that one piece of property. I think the original agreement continued to recognize their first fire engine and some of those pieces of equipment. Again, that's very typical as well. The useful life of that equipment has ended. So for purposes of value,
Sure, of course.
a fire truck usually has value for about 20 years, 25 at most, and then after that, it's more of a historical,
Right.
traditional type thing. So
Gotcha.
we can look at that and try to address that in that revision.
I
Awesome,
have a
thank you.
question. Tell me if I made this up or if I'm confusing it with something else. But did they say that they had thoughts of making a museum there, or did I put a museum?
No,
there?
that's my understanding. They want to put that historical equipment there, have a place to store their antique apparatus in that location.
So if that was something that they're willing to do, and that would be something that would be open to the public, then I could see that a little bit more in them keeping the land for that.
Okay.
Because then that would be of a public attraction. for-
Maintaining for public good.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on number 4?
Good, Dan?
Good explanation.
So the next item is that in that original agreement, we talked about this earlier with the part-time personnel, but this comes back up again because only full-time firefighters were included. 2 that they specifically ask is that the fire chief and their administrative assistant become part-time town employees. Now, the document didn't specify, Commissioner, in response to your question, those work hours, and that didn't get into that specificity. But the 2 individuals to become part-time town employees was identified in their revision.
I'm good with that.
I would say again, though, that through the budget, as I've put here, that there is a cost share piece. You have to work with the dollars you have, no matter what organization you're on, right? So the county and you, as the Board of Commissioners here in Rolesville, would have to agree to the funding pieces of that equation.
In the discussion, since they're not here to speak, did they state how Donnie would come over as an employee?
His name was specifically listed in this section, talking about part-time employees. He's obviously currently the part-time fire chief for the department. And then there's the section that talks about the selection of the fire chief. So I think it shows in both places right now. The last item of significance, number 6, is a change that shifts some of the financial management between the time of the resolution and the time of the merger occurring. So your adopted resolution calls for the town to approve any budget modification between the time of this resolution and now. I inserted that 2025, assuming you're agreeable to that, but it would give you approval between the time of resolution and the day of the merger. The fire department's requesting to substitute language there that just would inform you of any modifications to capital, operations, and budget. So that is a shift. Again, they have to have a budget that's supported by you as commissioners and also supported by Wake County. And the two have to come together in unison to make this work. But there is a change or a shift here that says, okay, before your original agreement said you would have to look at anything that was modifications to capital, operations, or budget, they're requesting to inform you versus approve. So those are two different words with 2 different meanings, and we need to bring that to you and ask for some direction of your perceptions and guidance as policymakers for the town of Rolesville.
That's a big change. That's a big change right there.
If I can step in for a minute. I think the proposal should read that you'll be a part of the budget approval process, just like the county is. And so they submit their budget come January, go through the process. They go through a county approval. I think you've all expressed last budget development that you wanted a similar kind of process. So I think that you should as a town. So you could just make it as part of the budget process. And then, like anything, if they come back and amend, they typically need approval. I think they do that with the county also. They have to go get the county approval for amendments. So I don't know why there would be a difference that would mirror county versus town process at this stage, if the intent is ultimately to be a partner in transition or to a town process. So,
Well said, agree.
Yep, and agreed.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And all funds that they have currently will stay inside their account, not merge over.
They would not merge until the time that the merger was effective.
Okay.
They're identified ahead of time, but,
Yeah.
and tracked, if you will, but it doesn't change hands until the effective date. And that's one reason that's like it's like, buying a house or buying something, you have a closing. For these type processes, you have a closing. So there's a definitive date. This is the date this happens, and that's the time that those funds begin to move from one location A to location B.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Did they give a reason why they wanted number 6?
That was their request. I don't have the context fully of that. Any other comments or direction or questions around item 6?
No, sir. Thank you.
So just in quick review for a moment, I just want to go back through these real quick. The date, again, the unification date shifted forward. If it were shifting backwards, we would have more concern. Shifting forwards, much more workable. Adding part-time employees is being recognized as the day of the merger and being eligible to participate. The town doesn't decide who's eligible, but the number of hours makes them eligible. So some more detail there, obviously. The lead in the fire chief hiring process was number 3. And then the real property for one of those pieces of property was the item for number 4, the Burlington Mills Road property that they own. And then the 2 employees specifically identified in number 5 to become part-time town employees. And then number 6, the change requested of them was to change the language from approval to inform. Okay?
Quick question. Can you go back to number 3 for a minute? And what was the change that's requested? What did the board say to that one? I'm sorry, I
Sure.
left.
So the original resolution that the board approved a year ago said that the town would be the lead in the selection of the full-time fire chief. The fire department is requesting that the fire department be the lead. They did not specify that the town couldn't be a part of it. It just said they wanted to be the lead. What we heard from your colleagues here tonight was that it needs to be a collaborative process,
Okay.
that the lead was not as important as everyone being at the table and being part of that decision.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So there has been a lot of work done over this past year. I do want to make sure that you understand. We actually sat at this table quite a bit with staff and fire department staff, and they've been actively involved, not only the chief, but other members of the department have been actively involved in this process as well. But that mutual agreement on those 6 requests really is needed to move this forward, because we're in a holding pattern until these things are addressed. We understand our charge is to take what feedback you have given and make modifications and try to work out something so that there can be one joint resolution moving forward. So, mirroring those changes and requests they've made, and they are requesting that document be signed by everyone. So that is their request. And with that, if there's any other comments or direction that you might be able to share to us or to the manager, we would certainly like to hear that.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So we'll be working on moving this forward with your direction and working to find compromises in these 6 specific places to work out an mutually agreeable resolution.
Do we have a date where we're like shooting for it to be realistic for that July 1st?
Now, my understanding is the department's ready to move forward if these 6 items can be addressed.
Gotcha.
So that's my understanding.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Grace.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. We're going to move to item number 2, Appearance Commission. Town manager for that.
Okay. So today we are bringing back the Appearance Commission consideration. You talked about this in general about 4 months ago, I believe. Let me see, the original date we brought forward was in May. You had a good conversation, gave some good direction, and we brought back a memo that Meredith has provided. She is not here today, so Michael Ellenbarger and myself and Dave are going to kind of work through this a little bit and see if we can come out of this, at the end of this discussion, that we can generate an ordinance for you to consider in the future if you're so interested to continue moving forward with the Appearance Commission. So I have the memo up, and you can see that and I'm going to assume that you've mostly read through this, and you have your thoughts on it. But we try to emulate Wendell's Appearance Commission ordinance. Based upon our effort we talked back in May about, we all liked generally what they were doing, what it said, and it addressed most everything. Town attorney did a good job of reminding us of what the statutes are, and we want to go through that tonight a little bit to see if there's things that we want to change from this. But as you can see, Meredith kind of started drafting out an amendment that would be a text amendment for the LDO. And it talks about the Appearance Commission and the mission of that and how it has the authority consistent with the statutes of 160D and 304, the powers and duties of the Appearance Commission, and we can step through those as you want or need to. And it was pretty broad, but not specific enough to dictate what they need to be doing. I think it gives good general direction that they have some authority to pick and choose what they want to work on, and you also can give them direction once formed. What you want them to work on was how Wendell's reads and how it works out through this first draft. That they have the ability to do subcommittee formation to work on different things that are related to what the commission wants to work on as far as ideas or thoughts or anything that they may take up that's specialized. And then they have any actions that they can take per the LDO or ordinance that's authorized by you. Here's the membership piece that we can get into a little bit more. And it's very similar to many of your memberships of your current existing boards. It follows the statutes, I believe, right, Dave? And it also follows the methodology of going out in ETJ and such and bringing in a broad-based group.
It does.
I didn't see that part, though. I'm sorry, I missed it.
What's that?
About referencing the ETJ.
Let's see.
I mean,
It's all members of the commission shall reside within town's planning and development regulation jurisdiction at the time of appointment.
Oh,
doesn't
so
co-
it doesn't specifically
How
say-
many there
Oh, I
are,
thought that
right.
was- okay.
It's within the ETJ, though.
And then I have a question about number 4. So we're doing this with successive terms without limitation?
Is that
we don't do
consistent
that
with what our
planning.
current, that may
No.
not be.
Yeah, it's the same.
I
We don't
saw
have that.
too.
Yeah, I don't
The
think we
board,
should do
the
that.
board has considered, term limits and I believe has adopted term limits for the planning board.
Yeah.
As well as the Parks and Rec. Yep.
So let's use the same thing
What
for
are the
the
term limits? Anybody remember?
3 years,
It's 2 consecutive
terms.
terms.
Two consecutive
terms.
terms.
two
Yeah.
terms.
Consecutive.
So that
Two
probably needs to be
consecutive, so they can go
considered.
off and come back.
Right.
Correct.
You'd want to be consistent, I'm assuming, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think it should be consistent.
Okay,
Good,
and can we
thank you.
be a little more, okay, and I know it says it, but if it would it be too much to put the ETJ as being inclusive of that comment, even though it is the number one?
I also noted too that it said, somewhere else it said extraterritorial.
Yeah.
And to me, that's not the complete phrase, and I also think it should be in parentheses, ETJ, just to
Yes.
make it clear for people that, because we refer to that all the time,
Sure.
whenever you're going to call it out.
So the language regarding the membership is verbatim from the statute.
Oh,
So that's the statutory language. The voting rights section, which is at the end, which is subsection G, makes clear, because you'll recall we had this issue
It does.
with our planning board, with the adoption of General Statute 160D, voting rights did not extend to the ETJ members unless the board had expressly placed that in the ordinance. So this addresses that at subsection G. The statute requires a proportional number of ETJ members based upon the proportion that live outside versus inside. So you really can't set a number.
That's not my question at all.
Okay.
You're going down a path that I'm
Okay,
going down.
I thought that was the question.
Mine was semantics. It was truly, it says extraterritorial area. Even when I read it, I went, wait, that's the ETJ?
Versus.
But I think the language, isn't it extraterritorial jurisdiction, which is our ETJ?
Ma'am, where are you on this? Because that would
In G.
surprise me
In
too.
G.
Well, there's another section that I was looking at.
There's
So then you
reference
come down here and then it just says
jurisdiction
area.
and extraterritorial
I think
area.
it should be referred to as extraterritorial jurisdiction.
Agreed. The first one says jurisdiction, the second one says area. That
Sorry,
should be
I
corrected.
saw that when I was Googled
Yep.
it and I was.
No, it should be
making sure I was
jurisdiction
right.
both times.
So mine was just semantics, not.
Okay.
The other stuff I get. Thanks, I think that might have been Michelle's. Was your question
I
about what
was
he was
going to
addressing?
each of them, but yes, that's it.
It is an excellent point, though. We are required to place on this board of 7 a proportional number of ETJ members, which in theory changes every time we get a new decennial census.
Gotcha. That's for all the boards.
And that's good because sometimes those who are in the ETJ, they realize they're there and they realize that they feel like their rights are limited to basically non-existent. So to see this, to read this on their own, it would be nice to see it clear that they are included in this whole setup here.
If-
So I'm good with what you said, so we can move on to the next one.
Question for you, sir. If we're unable to appoint any of the positions, then this will fall under the planning department?
Let's move on. So, under related issues in your memo, Meredith writes, staff are concerned about the likelihood of finding 7 members for an appearance commission. We just put it out there. With the 2 other advisory boards managed by the planning department, 1 seat stayed open for a planning board for several months, and the board of adjustment has 2 vacant seats. An alternative to creating a new commission is to add this to the planning board's duties. So what Meredith is suggesting is that you could use the planning board as your appearance commission, if that's of interest to you.
I think that's a good idea.
That makes sense.
And you would modify the planning board duties
Yes.
and include some of these duties very specifically. And as Dave said, you might even call out specifically that they would wear 2 hats. That there'd be hat 1, planning board meeting, hat 2, commission, appearance commission. And I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that, Dave, or not.
Definitely have thoughts.
Since we spoke about that, I have had more thoughts about
Okay,
that,
good.
which is why the planning director and I lean toward the idea of just giving their duties to the planning board, or giving some to the planning board and some to the parab, because
That's
if you call it the appearance commission, then it has to have 7 members, then it has to have the right? You trigger the statute.
Yes, yes.
So you probably don't want to call it the Appearance Commission. You just want your planning board to do Appearance Commission duties, if that was what you wanted to do.
Yes.
I would strongly disagree, and let me tell you why, for several reasons.
Okay.
One, we've had our planning board. There has not been a focus on appearance. As a matter of fact, some of the things that have been done should have been caught by our planning board. I am not throwing them under the bus, but that's not their focus. And on this, we called out specifically looking for people that have that interest and that experience. So I think we need that experience in our town, especially as fast as we're building and growing. We need that experience in our town. The other one, I already know for a fact there are several people interested, and I question our marketing efforts. Even in getting, because I went back to all of our memos to see what our communication was to our community. There's been very little. Even I, as a board member, don't always know what's open and what's available and what's needed. So I think we have to change and think about marketing differently. But there are people in this town, you can drive around and look at where some people live and how they keep their homes up, that are concerned about the appearance of Rolesville and would be interested, I'm sure, in volunteering their time. I know of several already. So I just don't think our planning board is focused on this, or has not been. And I hate to call it out, but my case in point are the bricks, the new building by Food Lion. That was a different proposal brought to us. There was block. It was block style to look more like CVS and the school, and it does not. So when that happened, I feel like there was a sale on bricks somewhere. And if you have an appearance commission that's focused on that, things like that don't necessarily fall through the cracks. So I really think we need to focus on having, and to me, 7 people is not a lot. If we were having to get 15, that would be a different story. And I think as far as the Board of Adjustment, maybe the advertisement needs to be a little more sexy because it might be boring or it's not out there. So I think it needs to be called out. We've talked about it repeatedly. We used to have people focused on this just from a committee perspective. I think I had 8 people on a committee just pulling people together. So I do think we need to call this out so that it is focused, and we are building fast. The planning board will not catch everything. And I think it gets confusing when you give extra duties to a board that's already working on so many specs. So those are my thoughts on it. And I had one more, but I forgot.
I was just going to say that they do focus on that in the beginning, but I'm not so sure that the building in question that you mentioned fell under the planning department after it left the planning department. And I do know that some of the guys on the
Again, I'm not throwing
committee.
them under the
I know
bus,
you're not, but I think they do.
if that's not your focus, it's not
But
your focus.
I don't think that was something, just commenting on the example that you gave. I don't think that fell on the planning department. That came after the fact.
It should have looked like the
Okay.
display
Yeah.
that came.
And
that was
I would
on
agree with
planning.
you.
That's on planning.
But I just don't think it all falls on planning, but I understood what you were saying now.
I don't
If
know
you
where
have
else
an
it would
eye-
fall.
If you have an eye, if you are looking specifically for that, I'm sure it would be brought to the planning board's attention, but I don't think that it is.
Right. I understand what
No,
you're saying.
even when they go with the landscaping, when they're discussing the landscaping,
And the types of trees.
right, and they are very focused on that. So I think it needs to be detailed, if that's what they're going to be looking for. I think they can very well handle that, but if it's going to go to a committee, like you said, you had a committee at one point in time, but if it's going to go to a committee, then the committee will know what to look for. But if that's not something under the purview of the planning department to look at that, or if it gets approved and something else changes by the time they go before, but by the time they come back and before they come to us, the ball could have been dropped in several different ways.
I'm just saying the building does not look like what was presented to us. That's where I'm at. I'll stay there the rest of my life. That's not what was presented to us. That was brick that was on sale. I don't even know.
So, I don't know, so if it's going to go to the planning department, I understand why, but if it's going to stick with this committee, I think everything would just need to be lined out as to what it is that they are outlined as to what it is that they are supposed to be doing and looking for, and making sure it's correct and it meets the requirements, and then it travels down that path and it stays consistent. So, I think that puts us back to where we were before
Yeah.
Commissioner Sutton said anything, before I said anything, on how we're going to do that. But I do have a question, though. So when you say it's 7 people, and say we have 7 people to start out, and then we have that gap where we weren't able to fill it with that seventh person, are you saying that that's when we're more or less not in violation, but not really following the guidelines of the statute, or what?
The board could operate so long as it has a quorum, even if it has a vacancy,
All right, so I
just
do
like our
agree
Board
with-
of Adjustment can.
So I do agree with Commissioner Sutton that I think it will be easy to, not easy, it can be filled with 7, but I just wanted to know when you said that part about not having 7 moving forward, that was just a little concerning. Because it could happen. They had less than their required amount on Parks and Rec. We definitely had less on ours. But that was not due to lack of people wanting it. It was just timing of when we were advertising it.
I just thought of the last thing I wanted to add. The other thing is signage. We've talked about signage since I came on this board. And it's not owned. I don't know where it is. I don't know where it sits. At one point, we had a citizen committee do a whole big Bible on signage by going to other municipalities. I do think that's something else that they could focus on. And that would pull some, or give planning, I would say, support. And I lied, one more thing. As far as staff support, because I know there's a concern with that, we could also pull not just 7, we could pull people from the community that might want to volunteer on an administrative basis to provide some administrative support. I think we have a very engaged community. I think it's a part of pulling them in different ways, whether that's reaching out to people directly, the blast, not everybody's on social media, but different ways that we need to reach out to folks. And us individually, I know I can reach out again to some people, but I think it's needed.
My question is about the appearance committee enforcing some of the eyesores that already exist.
So I'll let Town Attorney, do you want to address that? Or
Sure.
Is
So
that-
as an overarching concept for an appearance commission, it doesn't have any enforcement authority.
Because that could be scary.
The appearance commission can make recommendations regarding things that the board sees in the community, can make recommendations regarding shortages that it finds in our town code or our LDO. It can make recommendations to applicants who have been routed for an appearance commission review, but the appearance commission can't enforce, it can't impose any requirements. And if something gets routed to the appearance commission and a recommendation is made regarding the color of brick, and then that plan goes back to the TRC, the planning department, for approval, the planning department cannot enforce that recommendation. It purely is something that the applicant would choose to do if they wanted to, because it's a good idea.
Okay. What about existing property that's eyesores?
The Appearance Commission could refer something they've seen to the planning department for enforcement for a zoning violation, but unless it's a town code or a zoning violation, fortunately for ugly people like me, simply being unattractive is not a crime.
And we do that now. When you see something, anybody can do that.
Oh yeah. I see it all the time when I drive through town.
Yeah, but do you ever report it?
I laugh.
See that? No, but that can be anybody to do that. I think that's putting an extra burden on that.
I laugh because it's
That
grandfathered
commission.
in.
So a question I have about this, I'm just trying to think out loud right here, is this is a standalone committee versus it as a subcommittee of the planning board. If it's a subcommittee of the planning board, then you don't have all the requirements of a certain amount of people on that board or this or that. Is that right?
Well, in theory, it wouldn't be an appearance commission. It would
Okay.
be additional duties placed upon the planning board, focusing the planning board members on appearance.
But they could be well, I get, yeah, they'd have to be a member.
They would have to be members of the planning
Okay.
board. That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I just don't want anything getting lost between the two. I mean, we have a committee for this, a committee for that, and everything else, but putting all the pieces together, so I make sure we're not missing things.
There will be a logistics issue of this and I believe this is in the memo. I'll let Kelly jump on that.
Yep. I think there's a question that Meredith raises about how long, if it changes development review process. I don't know if we know that for certain. We suspect there could be sometimes it will, because it may deserve a stop in Parents Commission as part of the approval process. And then obviously Meredith has raised staffing as kind of a continuing theme that we'd have to think about, and Commissioner Sutton raised that there could be opportunities to use volunteers if so, but those are the other two parts that Meredith raises in here, is that the development review could be impacted. I don't think we know exactly what that could be until we get going on it, and then staffing. So it's citing an unknown, but acknowledging it's an unknown. So.
And I was thinking about that when I was reading over this. When you're presenting stuff to the planning department, and I saw the 35 to 50 more hours for, that's a lot of prep work. Could there be some joint effort there so that you're not repeating yourself and calling out the things that the Appearance Commission would address versus planning would need to address?
I think that's right.
Instead of
You probably advised Meredith.
adding work.
Sure. Is the question about the manpower for staff to administer an appearance commission?
Right, no, I was.
Just it will take more time, probably.
I was just saying, in relation to it taking more time, could some of that work be done together, where they're in the same, however you're prepping, I don't know how you prep for the planning board, but there's some items I would think would be called out that would be specific for the Appearance Commission to take a look at, so that you're not having to redo that work.
Right. I wouldn't automatically just double the amount of time that
Right.
it takes to prepare for planning board. In addition, I would tend to think that an appearance commission might not have items every month. So it
Right.
might not be 12 times a year, like the
Right.
planning board is nearly every month, et cetera. So there would be some efficiencies of scale to
Sure.
do that. You start with the same documents, et cetera.
Sure.
But I too vetted that 30 to 50 hours, and I went through my mind, and I totally agree with that. When you talk about all the staff involved over the course of the month, with everything involved, that's very accurate. So it is yeah, I would agree with that number, but I wouldn't just apparently double it
Double it,
for
gotcha.
creation of an appearance.
Because then the other thing is the planning board meeting, just like our meetings, is recorded. So one of the requirements or, duties of the Appearance Commission is to watch the planning board meeting, because you can get some information right there and it saves staff time.
Yeah.
So we tell our planning board and our Parks and Rec, watch these meetings so that they're aware too. So I think there can be some efficiencies, like you said.
Okay.
So thank you for that.
There are communities that have joint meetings. I don't know that we necessarily have the facility to make that work perfectly, but there's no prohibition upon your planning board and appearance commission meeting at the same time and forcing the applicant to run the gauntlet through both.
Gotcha. And I'm not trying to say there's only one way to do it. What I'm trying to say is you have people looking at different things, kind of to Michelle's point. And so you want those people looking at the things that need to be looked at. I think Dan just pointed out some of the eyesores that we have. And we're not trying to create eyesores. And planning may not be focused on that. If I'm focused on 100 specs, I may not be looking at, oh, I need to think about this too. But someone who's really focused on that, they're looking at that and they're catching that. And that, I think, is what I'm trying to emphasize that we need.
No, that's a great point, because as soon as the project is approved, start getting built, of course, we're moving on with other projects and things like that. This committee can come in with the Parks and Rec Board, working simultaneously with the Planning Board. Builder said they was gonna do this with trees and things like that. They drive around to make sure that it's all done. I think that will be a good partnership. And I know several people that will volunteer, now that you said that.
And signage, I have to say it again, signage, it's needed. As we build more commercial in Rolesville, really having something focused on that, having a signage, and I'm saying signage, giving business options on what they can have so your community looks cohesive.
Right.
And it's not a hodgepodge and people just creating things.
Yeah, if you remember, a year and a half ago, Meredith and you all talked about LDO amendments potentially, and we kind of had a whole list, right?
Yes, sir.
And we started checking that list. On that list was Meredith saying you need to talk about the sign code.
She did.
And so that's been pending,
Year and a half.
and it could be one of the subjects you bring to this group is to assist on that sign code.
Right, exactly.
I'm just a little curious about something that Commissioner Austin said. How does that work? If someone's already started construction, would that be detailed in steps for the committee? Like, how does that even work?
Presumably, Commissioner Sutton is talking about amendments to the LDO with regard to our sign code so that the sign choices that applicants have.
She talking about my comment.
No, Commissioner Austin said, you know, when somebody's starting to build, correct? Someone's going out there like a Wake County inspector typically does, checking for other things, obviously. Are you saying that they would go out there and to make sure that the right facades are going on a building?
No, well, not necessarily the building, but they working and listening to the planning board and the parrot board and saying, okay, these trees are going down, these trees are getting planted. They're just going to make sure everything is according to what was agreed upon the planning board meeting, and then when it comes to us for approval. Just making sure.
How does that even work, though?
Staff does that. We reviewed.
Planning Department does.
Yeah, that's
Planning
our-
Department
that's
does
our-
that, as well as Wake County inspectors
Right, that's
ensure
what I'm
that
saying. So how do you-
that the plan is constructed in accordance with the plan.
Right, I understand that they do that. So you're saying take that duty away and give it to this subcommittee?
No.
No, I'm saying everybody working together to do this, that it can ease some of the burden of the planning board actually going in.
The Appearance
that
Commission would be involved before there is a final plan,
Yeah.
and it would make recommendations to the applicant, or if it were a rezoning case, could make recommendations that become available to the board on a rezoning. The board will need to decide, however, what category of items, and we're probably not ready to do that this evening,
No,
get referred to the Appearance
I
Commission.
get all that part, but I'm getting to the part where you're actually doing the physical work. Is that what you're saying?
It can be a combination of both.
Oh, okay.
'Cause that's
So
the
if
ensuring everything is done.
But how does that committee?
The commission doesn't, the Appearance Commission doesn't play a role in that. The
Okay, that's what I'm
staff
asking.
does that.
Okay, gotcha. That's what I'm saying.
The
because that would
professional
be
staff of the planning
That's-
board
that's the
and the
key
Wake
word.
County staff, in terms of inspectors, ensure that construction occurs in accordance with the plans.
So that, when you said professional staff, that's what I was getting at. Because I'm like, how are they going to go out there and
Yeah,
do that?
yeah, they're just
not-
working simultaneously with the boards.
Those, per the LDO, those who violate their plan, build something that has not been permitted in the town, receive notice of that and can receive a stop work order and an order to correct it as a notice of violation.
So I get that from the professional staff, but when you refer to it as, you had said, this committee, the committee's not doing that.
The commission is not doing that.
No, they're not physically doing that, but they could see it, tell, and it goes up the chain, just like normal.
You can imagine, given the way staff wrote the draft, the commission may have as an agenda item a discussion among the members about things they're seeing and whether those things are currently properly addressed by the code. And if they are not, those things could be referred to staff, or the commission might decide to take a first draft at an amendment. All those things could happen, but they're at the policy level.
Gotcha.
But eventually
Okay.
that'll
Just wanted
route to
make sure
you.
You were saying that part. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the draft, or Dave, is there anything in the statute you want to bring to the board's attention that you think is not addressed, or is it all addressed in here that we need to talk about?
I think I had previously sent to all, or I may have only sent to Sheila, and Sheila circulated to all, the list of possible duties one can assign to your Appearance Commission. That's 160D 960. The list that we have here is crafted from the Wendell model, which was one that the board at a prior work session had remarked favorably upon. But there are, in theory, more things that you could list from 960. The one that I, as a lawyer, am concerned about is that the board needs to decide what goes to the Appearance Commission? Is it every site plan? Is it every zoning case? Is it only site plans over a certain size? Is it only non-residential? Because for residential single-family detached, the town doesn't have any authority to regulate that anyway.
And I think Wendell's ordinance contemplates that will happen after the seating of the commission and probably some conversation. And can that happen then? And the board says, we'd like to have you take on these issues?
If an application is routed, for example, for a rezoning to the board, and the board were to determine we're not ready to take action on this, and instead we would like to route this to the Appearance Commission first, that certainly will always be within your discretion. The real question is as to all the things that are just administrative approvals, site plans, no applicant can be forced to go to the Appearance Commission unless that's part of our law.
So I think I'm thinking about this differently. So I don't have a legal mind, not an engineer, right? But this is how I think of this. So if my expertise is, I don't know, architecture, right? So I'm looking for architectural standards, right? So I feel like our commission needs to be given like a set of standards that they're looking for, not reviewing all of the specs that the planning board has reviewed. To me, that's pointless and a waste of time. But say there was a list of 10, we want you looking for these things. Those are the 10 things that they're going to be looking to identify. Is this done? Is this right? Is this within the standards that we want? Those are the things. And then when it moves, when it is approved, those things, those gaps of time, and then people start saying, wait, I thought that was supposed to be like this. I use my example, the brick building. When it stopped halfway, it was like that was the time for somebody to say, hold up, that does not look like. Do you see what I'm saying? So almost like a checklist, more so than every single thing. Maybe some things aren't required to even go to the planning board. I mean, to the Appearance Commission.
What's required to go to the Appearance Commission is entirely however we craft this.
Right, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
more of a
that's right.
checklist in the line of appearance. You're looking for appearance items, appearance specs, if you will, versus looking for every single item that the planning board would be looking for, those specifications, how far it's set back, da-da-da-da-da. I think the Appearance Commission would be focused on, what kind of bushes are going there, right? And are the bushes in the right place? And are there enough trees that you said you were going to put there? Are they actually there? That type of thing, more so than
Wait, that's
every
not what
single
we're saying?
spec.
Because I agree with you. I thought that's what was being said.
It's
But it just
whatever.
hasn't been defined yet.
So that's
what we're
that's
trying
what
to
we're asking
define.
you.
Right, that's what
So
we're trying
what
to
would you like to route to this? Let's accept we are going to create an Appearance Commission, and they're going to sit here once a month. What will be referred to them every month? Every site plan submitted? Only big ones? Only non-residential ones?
Okay, so can I just say, wouldn't it be nice to have this conversation with the planning board and the committee? It would be better to have them in here with that conversation. Because I don't think we all know.
That's what I was going
Everything that the planning board
That's what I was
does.
trying to ask Dave was, could that dialogue take place after the Appearance Commission takes seated?
Right.
And then the work is defined further?
It certainly could be the case that the Appearance Commission is formed without any duties as yet.
Division without.
It is purely a
doesn't feel
formed
right.
entity. And then, at a future meeting, the board would assign to it duties by adopting an amendment
Yeah.
that requires all X plans to route to them. Because otherwise, the applicant is not going to get delayed by a month to just happen to go see the Appearance Commission. They will go see the Appearance Commission only if it's the law of Rolesville.
I would say no to that because they don't know what they're getting themselves into. And then we're going to go through this process of vetting them. And then when we lay out what we want, they're like, oh, I didn't realize I was signing up for that. So,
What? What do you mean?
I'm confused.
Who is
okay,
they?
so
I'm confused
are
too.
you saying that you get a appearance committee together first?
Yeah.
Correct?
I'm
And
asking as a
No, but is
rhetorical
that what
because
you-
I thought
and then lay out
you
the
had
duties to
suggested
them?
it.
That's what I'm understanding you to say.
He's asking
Is that
for
what you're
guidance from the
asking?
board.
Or
I'm
suggesting?
asking, what would you like the Appearance Commission to do?
He's asking for guidance from us.
Correct, and I'm saying, based on what you just said, what I'm thinking you're saying, I don't feel like we should seek out this committee yet until we know what the duties are going to
Oh, I
be.
see.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah, I think.
let's
that
think on
they
this
should
some
be
more rather than
prepared.
forming the
How do
commission.
you call people
Exa- that-
together and
and
you
that's
don't
what
even
I'm
have a
saying. That's what
vision
the
to
what
tell them
is.
what they're going to be doing? That's harder to recruit somebody.
Right.
I don't know what you're going to be doing, but come on board.
That would be a
Saying.
waste of time because, again,
make
you may
sense.
get some people, you may get everybody saying, okay, I'll do it, but you may get those who say no.
That
Then
was
you just
certainly
went through
not
a
my
whole
suggestion.
Process of vetting.
I had hoped, because staff wasn't sure, that perhaps there was a consensus as to what sort of applications have to go to the Appearance Commission.
Like all of those that are going to be on Main Street, something like that. Is that what you're
Sure.
asking?
Everything on Main Street has to go to the Appearance Commission. You could
Okay,
adopt
that's
that by
one.
action, and that would happen.
And that's what I mean by checklist. So if
Right.
that's your checklist versus every single item that comes through, these are things we're looking for. So if you get a development that comes in and it has these particular things that fall on that checklist, okay, the Appearance Commission needs to see that. If it doesn't have those things, then there's no need for them to see it.
Okay, so wait, there was a community that was supposed to have certain size trees. Do you remember that one? It's a couple of years back, and they didn't get that. You know, and the developer, you know who I think it
Certain
was?
size
I think it
trees?
was a certain height, and they didn't get it, and it was too late. So that's not a Main Street thing, although Main Street can be a part of this whole plan. But how do you get in front of that with that appearance committee, right?
Well, the Appearance Commission, if someone had an approved plan and then they did not do it, that's never going to be the Appearance Commission. That's not what they do.
Happened.
They're not the appearance police. They're at the front end making recommendations.
Gotcha, okay.
Could be appearance eyes, though. They could be the appearance
Yeah.
eyes.
That is
Still
one of their
got that-
duties.
still got that.
Right, to give a heads up to the board, or maybe to give a heads up to the planning board, or to the manager, or to the planning director. We are seeing this. We think an LDO amendment is in order to make sure that we're no longer seeing this in the future. That's an appearance commission.
And that's why I'm not certain you're ready to specify that yet, because it would deserve a conversation, I think, amongst you all, with the members, to talk about what are the priorities you want them to work on. But if you already know that, we could put that in there, but if you don't, and you
I
want
don't
to
think
get,
we know.
Conversation with the
The planning board,
not the other
definitely.
people, because
Yet.
I wouldn't sign up for
Okay.
something not knowing what my responsibilities are going to be.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you may told me 2 hours, and I'm going to be here 7 hours a month. I'm not doing that. You know what I'm saying? So.
Let's
with
let's
the
direct it to the planning board.
I can see that because they have information.
so take a draft to the planning board and let them work through. a
Let them
little bit.
dissect it, add to it, subtract from it, or what have you, and then let,
Work for y'all?
Yes.
Yeah.
with the
And that
draft
may
of
be
this
things they
and
want to
what
say
Dave-
anyway.
Yeah.
These are things that, yeah, that would be great things for them to focus on,
Okay.
that we just may not be aware. Michelle more so than us, rather.
So are you okay taking the vehicle we have now, and then this, almost this exact memo, and come back to them and ask them the same questions we're having here?
yes. Yes for me.
With some of the suggestions that Dave emailed as well.
The only thing I would add is signage. I think this is an opportunity.
You want to get into the sign.
I think the
Yep,
signage
I
should
agree.
be added, because that's something that needs a proactive
I
approach.
think that's-
This is the time to
Yeah.
actually take
If you
action
needed
on
them
it.
to come in and work on something right away,
So
hello.
the draft says to direct the attention of the Board of Commissioners to needed enforcement of any ordinance that may in any way affect the appearance of the town. That would be ordinances that already exist.
It's this.
Then there is a power in the statute that talks about proposing to the Board of Commissioners amendments that are necessary or codes that are necessary, and that can be broken out separately. Because right now, we're thinking about signage.
It could be
2 years from now, it'll be something else, and 50 years from now, this ordinance will still be on the books. So,
As long as it's covered, I'm just saying, there's things for folks to do now. Good point.
Do you still, you don't have what you started out with your committee, the notes?
Oh, I have the notes. You know I have the notes.
Oh, okay, so. all
Thank you,
right.
sir.
That's a good starting point, too, for the
I
planning
definitely have
board.
the notes.
So just to recap, take this work, your dialogue, bring it to the planning board. I think I'm hearing a general support for one of the items could be specifically called out the sign elements.
Signage, yes, sir.
Initially. and ask them what other pieces they would like to see the Parents Commission work with you all and staff, and have those, and if they're statutorily approved, they could be added to the ordinance.
For the
I like
benefit of the
that Main
public,
Street
it's
thing, though.
It's 160D 960 is a laundry list or menu of jobs or duties or powers that one could give to one's appearance commission.
Right. So this would be the focus right here. It's up on the board.
But it's not all-inclusive. You said you called out a part of it, right? Or is that all of it?
The ordinance does not include all of the ones that are under the possible things you could have your appearance commission do, as this was modeled off of the Wendell model.
Wendell one, right?
Yep,
Gotcha.
that's right.
Okay,
Is that clear as mud, Kelly?
I think it's clear. I don't know, staff will have to work through this, and Michelle, you'll be kind of a key conversationalist as a liaison for the board to
Okay.
help guide it too. So, okay, good?
Good.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
We'll move on to item number 3, which is discussion of text amendments on private streets. I just want to remind the board that we are talking about the text amendment and not the actual development at this time.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yep.
Request 5-minute recess?
Yep. Let's take a 5-minute recess until 7:26. Maybe.
This full-page handout you gave me earlier, I turned it into a PowerPoint as well. It's right there.
Okay.
So if you want to switch to, so this is your main, that's that, and then that's something I made.
Okay.
In fact, I'm going to close that for now. If we need it. Okay, so that works.
Do a command to get the.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to just thank you. My name's Jason Pfister, Vice President Development with Ellis. Back before you today to kind of restart that discussion. We started with the text amendment related to the private access easements for our townhomes. Wanted to let you know during the break I put we got some additional renderings from our renderer today. You can see they're obviously still in draft. That's why the people are all kind of not colored in yet, but I'm hopeful that this will help kind of illustrate our points, and the finalized version will be included in this PowerPoint for the October 3rd meeting. I just didn't want to change the PowerPoint and not have it match what was in here, but just want to kind of explain what that was in case. So, like I said, we heard you. We know the last presentation was kind of confusing and raised some questions. So I think what we've done, again, this is just to remind you, this is our project off Mitchell Mill Road. We're talking, it's a mixed-use project with single-family, commercial, and residential, but we're just talking about really the design of the townhomes and the orientation of the townhomes here. So with that, I'm going to turn our presentation over to Keith Spalding, who is our land planner with Strong Rock, to kind of explain our text amendment and the rationale behind it.
Okay. Just to give you a little more background, I'm officially the Director of Design and Community Planning for Strong Rock Group, and I have graduate degrees in urban planning and landscape architecture. So Commissioner Sutton, I guess you could say I'm an expert in this area of design. What we want to do, just start with a very basic overview and say, when we come to any site in any town, there's always four great engineering entities that are beyond the scope of the municipality that we deal with. And here it's the Army Corps of Engineers, which is the federal government, Duke Energy, which is actually the regional power company, and they have very specific requirements that we abide by. In fact, if we don't, then they say we're rejecting it and we have to start all over again on our plan. Within the state itself is NCDOT, with very specific guidelines and state rules and structures on how we build roads and how we deal with traffic. And these are universal standards throughout the state. And interestingly, here in Raleigh, we end up in the Raleigh Metropolitan Area, in the Triangle, we deal with the City of Raleigh Utility Department as a main focus of services that the town itself doesn't provide per se. And so when we go one step further for the City of Raleigh, this is where our thought process begins. What does Raleigh regulate that affects and impacts the site plan? And actually, Raleigh does four things now: water, sanitary sewer, stormwater, and actually garbage collection per se, in the sense of the rollout cairns. And that comes to fact now that when you, I live in Wake Forest, when we pay our water bill, garbage collection is part of it. And so we see now the universal issue of those rollout cans every day coming into play. So these four requirements then kind of set the foundation for when we deal with the town itself. And so when we finally get to Rolesville, we have these set of zoning requirements that are very specific to the town. And so again, when we're looking at townhomes themselves, we're looking at a very specific parking count, water lines and sewer meters, where they go, even though they're directed by Raleigh, stormwater issues, street access for garbage containers, but then Rolesville street tree and sidewalk standards, Rolesville setbacks, Rolesville where they want the fire hydrants, and actually that's also the Wake County, and street lights, which is another Rolesville and Wake Forest. And then other issues too that are the burden of the public street, like where the school buses go. A public school bus can only go on the public street, per se. And at the same time, this public street is actually being built to DOT standards, which get us back to the earlier essay. So it has a certain width, a certain construction, a certain material usage, a certain thickness, that all has to come into play. What we've seen with your new LDO, which we want to commend in a sense of, you've seen some really ugly stuff in town. You rewrote your LDO to kind of address that, so Rolesville's kind of made a giant step forward, if you will, in that sense. What we've noticed in looking at your new UDO is with townhomes, there's a unique phenomenon, and that is townhomes have to have this new extra parking requirement. And when we're looking at the plans, we end up always having to create a separate parking lot for your townhome community. And so we have this unique little situation on the street where we have lots of curb cuts on a public street, as the townhome says, every 20 feet. But then on top of that, we also have to build parking lots. And I think what we're trying to propose to you in the LDOs, the intent was to create a better street, a workable street, a safer street, but maybe not that form exactly. And so the whole intent of this text change is to give you an option for a different form, yet meets your same code.
Question for you, sir.
Yes.
This image that is to my right, our right.
This one, this one.
Yes, sir. Right where the roundabout is, that's slightly different from.
Yeah, to
Yes.
be clear, that's our original.
This was our original plan that we presented to the planning board and the TRC 9 months ago in January.
And it's that long, Commissioner
It's
Olson, the
the-
long row on the left there is what kind of sparked this conversation from
Right.
the town planning staff and review comments.
There was a drawing we presented at the meeting last time, which some of you said was very hard to read. That was the comments back from town staff saying, you've created almost 40 conflicts between driveways and this on a public street. Can you come up with something that's safer and better and works better for our town? And that was our challenge, and as Director of Design, that's my challenge to say, okay, if you want me to do that, I will do that. And that's why we're here today, is to show you what we've come up with to give you an option to make your town function better, to look better, and for the streets to work better themselves. The next thing that we also wanted to point out, that we pointed out to the planning board, is the first requirement in your LDO is that subdivisions have to have public access on 20 feet on a public street. Townhomes, just townhomes themselves. And we found this example here in Raleigh in which we have that same requirement of frontage on a public street, and we don't like it. And you can see the same issue that we have before: too many garbage cans, no place to go, too many cars, no access, too many curb cuts. There's actually no street trees here, and that's because of the Raleigh ordinances with water and sewer, not allowing street trees. And we think we can do better. And we think Rolesville deserves better. And frankly, this picture will never make it on the cover of the Chamber of Commerce Welcome to Raleigh magazine. So we want something nicer. And as a result, let's see, we've come up with this approach, and that was to kind of flip the whole site plan on its side and sideways and create a series of public access easements in which we take the requirements from Raleigh, NCDOT, and your zoning and expand it to make it fit townhomes better. And so as a result, we have two ideas here: a front access easement and a rear access easement, as well as areas for garbage containers. And then it helps us meet your town ordinances as well. So we try to, this meets everything that we can think of. By separating out the front and rear access by rotating the townhomes 90 degrees, it gives us Raleigh sewer and water, Raleigh stormwater, a place to put garbage, and yet it still meets all your subdivision ordinances, all your setbacks, street trees, and it also is confined within the block. In other words, In other words, in Rolesville, your blocks can be anywhere from 400 feet long to 1,200 feet. So that's the general idea. So when we take a closer look at that, when we look at the front of the building, and you'll see we have better graphics to help explain this. This is the first rendering that we did.
Yeah, I think these renderings are probably a little bit more helpful. The
It's
first
the-
one in your packet is a view of the front. It's kind of a common area. And with this approach, that would allow us to put the stormwater in.
The stormwater and make a pedestrian pocket, a safe area where people can walk. And yet at the same time, we're also allowed, it gives us space for front yards, actually a pollinator garden as well, and a real sense of civic space for these townhomes. And it then allows us to maintain the integrity of your new ordinances with regard to the street. So now all of a sudden, there's room for street trees, fire hydrant, school bus, garbage can pickup, and streetlights, and any other issues. And so we maintain the public street, and that public street is shown here in front of these buildings. And so this one then becomes your pedestrian pocket park, if you will. So that's half that's half of what we're proposing from the front.
So wait, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So where do your garbage cans go?
They would be rolled out and placed right here on the street, and then rolled back at night.
Back to your garage?
Roll back to your garage.
So you're walking your garbage, if you live on the far end, down to the street?
Yeah, 100 feet.
That's more than 100 feet.
No,
No, it's gotta be 120 feet is the maximum that we can have for the fire department.
for the fire, so.
I stand
The
corrected?
reason why we have 4 units and only 4 units here is we talked to the fire marshal and asked them, what is the requirement? Your requirement allows up to 8 townhomes. The fire marshal said, we can do 120 feet as a dead end without a turnaround, which then leads us to 4. So this prototype here shows only 4, because that's it. Anything more, we'd have to do something else. But this is why it's 4, and the best example is the front yard here we want to talk about really as kind of the pedestrian space, the place for families to play, for plants, for the garden. And when we look at the rear easement, which is,
The houses face each other, or they facing the back of the house next to it?
they're facing each other.
Yeah, they're back to back.
So the fronts face each other all the time.
Yeah, if you
So the front is facing each other in 2 of them, but then the other 2 is...
No, the faces always face each other.
I know the drawing looks opposite.
There's 2, one on each side of the building. Like there's 4 on this side and 4 on the other side, so that one building right there has 8 townhouses in it?
No, there's
No, these are
This is
4.
one townhouse. That's what you're seeing in the back is the garage. This is,
No, this one building right up here.
It's
right
4.
there.
There's 4.
4.
Yeah, it's 4. You can tell by the roof pictures, so it's
The
4.
back side of it.
The back side is the garage, and there's the back side of the garage.
So
So
back
this
and back.
one, front, and we're looking at the back. So the fronts always look at each other. So if you look at your drawings,
yeah, the drawing we got today is a little clearer on.
is a little
the back
clearer.
to
So
back.
But the ones next to it will be the opposite direction. Right?
they're always facing each other. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about if you go to, just in this rendering, they're facing each other front to front, but when you go to the next row over, it's the opposite
Back to back.
direction.
Yes, so they're back to back and then front to front. In that sense, it functions just as an alley would. So if you have in your code, you're allowed alleys, where the alleys have the garages serving the alleys, and then the fronts face the opposite direction. In this case, the garages all face our rear access easement. And a rear access easement here is the place for our Raleigh sewer and water easements or utilities. Raleigh code says they have to be minimum 35 feet wide. That is actually in excess of your code, which says the building have to be only 30 feet apart. What this does is allow us the opportunity to have 2 units of parking, a garage, 1-car garage for, let's say, your garbage cans, and it then gives us our guest parking to meet your zoning ordinance, because it's 1 car per 4 buildings. So in this case, here's our little guest parking space for our lot.
And the second illustration in the packet probably shows that.
Okay,
So this-
I have another question then. So,
Yeah.
excuse me, I'm sorry to
Yep.
cut you off. So basically, are you going to have 2 rows of townhomes going, or is it just a rendering showing an example? And this is why I'm asking. So say if you had 3 rows, 1, 2, and 3, right? That we wouldn't be able to see right now.
You couldn't do 3 rows.
Okay, so you have
they
it-
have
Gotta
to-
be equal.
They have to be in pairs because
work.
everyone has to have a front access and a rear
So
access.
this is what you're proposing in the LDO for all of, the way that all of the townhouses from now on will be there?
No, it's
As,
just, well, it's an option, but it's an option, it's still within conditional zoning, so it's not,
it's a text amendment to add to your existing ordinance
To allow for this?
to allow for this
as a secondary option. It's
within the
not nothing-
conditional zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So the front of the houses on one side will be facing the garage and the cars on the other side?
No, no,
They'll always
they're
be
in
back-
pairs.
Back to back. So, because you have, the alley is always going to be shared by.
I think your rendering shows it that way.
That's what it does.
When I look at this, I'm looking at the same thing she's
Yeah.
looking at.
Okay,
And so this, I'm just saying this particular rendering right here is what it looks like, the opposite of what you're saying. That first row looks like what you're talking about. And when you go to the next row, wait, why'd you switch up?
Sorry,
Can you go back to?
You can go back to the regular picture you
The
were just
picture
on.
it was already on, sir.
that one.
if you look at, every pitched roof is the front of the house, so you can see they're all.
Correct. I'm talking about the house side
Right,
by
you see these
side.
2 side by side right here, though? The pitch roof is on this side towards me. The other one is facing the other way.
This one?
Correct. No.
This one and that one, yes.
Oh, so, yeah, I guess.
Sides of public street.
Right, that's what we were
different
trying to
sides of the street,
clarify,
that's
though.
what-
Right.
She's been trying to clarify that for like 6 minutes now.
Okay, sorry.
All right, so basically they'll be facing, when you come out, you'll be facing the back of somebody else's. I mean, you're not facing it, but your view is going to be the back of their garage and all their cars, correct?
No, if you walk out your front door, you're going to see your neighbor's front door.
To the
directly
left of
across.
you.
Diagonal, you may see.
On the other side of the public street.
Right, on the
street,
same
but
side of the
that's-
street, it'd be front to front and back to back.
And the side, if you look at the additional renderings, you'll see that what we're proposing and what we're telling our render to have an ornamented side facade so that the side of the building would actually look more like the front. So, but these have to be in pairs in order to work.
Understand.
Now we're tracking with you in your pictures.
And there will be, not to get into our specific project, but for, as you can see in our site plan, this is not the entire, this is just a portion of the townhomes. There will be others that are, under the traditional, that will be on public streets and don't need this side of design. But for this design to work, it's got to be a pair of 4 houses, and they have to be back to back for it to make sense.
So this is, all of these front doors walk out onto like a community space?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's like a pedestrian.
It's we call it a pocket park, and so it's on,
So
we,
what you-
Did you say a pocket park?
yeah,
Okay, that's adventurous.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So, do we have that slide? We sent staff some, these new slides, so they're in here somewhere.
Gotcha.
So there it is. So that's what the fronts would look like. So when you'd walk out of your front door, you'd have your garden, your public space, your pocket park.
And so what this allows us to do by using this design, we still put in all of the requirements that's required by the LDO and the City of Raleigh Utilities, but it allows it to redistribute in a way that instead of that Headingham front yard where everything is crammed in and you don't really have a front yard you can use, it's basically just a glorified string of driveways. This gives a much more livable and usable space, but you still have all the requirements. There's no, everything that is required if we did it on a public street is still in this format.
Gotcha. I have a question about the back of it, where the garage is and the
Yeah,
road and
we
the.
had, let's look at
street.
that picture. I think that one, here it is.
Yeah.
So,
So that's not a street? I'm still concerned about the garbage cans. I think that's just weird. And maybe it's just me, what I'm used to in my neighborhood. But if I live in that last townhome down there by the basketball goal, I'm gonna drag my cans, plural, to the street, the end of the street. where the public street is.
Yep.
And then I'm going to work, say I don't work from home and I'm gone all day, and those are going to sit out in the street all day.
Yeah, they do in my neighborhood. We roll them out in the morning.
Yeah, but I roll to the end of my driveway.
I've often wondered about that because I have some friends that live in townhomes and they're like in the middle.
Right.
So if they don't have garages or anything, so they have to walk around the building to take their garbage out.
To a dumpster? or-
To
Well,
And-
no, they have a garbage person.
Yeah.
This is in
And
Greensboro.
that's
Right.
another thing too, from this, because this is gonna be a private access easement, it's gonna be controlled by the HOA. So it may very well be that the neighborhood decides to use a different, to use private trash or use something else. But in terms of this design, a city of Raleigh garbage truck cannot, that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That
So,
feels
yeah, so
problematic.
You're correct, so it would have to be rolled down to
You
the
know,
street.
a
So
city,
how,
a city
okay,
of,
go ahead, because I got a lot of questions in my head.
it's built to DOT standards, it's built to City of Raleigh widths. So if the HOA said, we'll make a deal with our garbage pickup for the truck to come down this street, pick up everything right there in front of your house, that's an HOA option that's available to them. Again, what we're looking at here is that very first slide of Headingham as the example, where the only place the garbage can go is right in front of your parked car.
I don't think anyone's disputing that.
Right.
I'm just concerned here because even if the HOA made an agreement, when you get to the end of there, there's no room to turn around. That creates a whole nother safety issue. So if they made an agreement with City of Raleigh to come down there, or a private organization, say private, how do they get out of there?
Well, if it was a private agreement, companies would use smaller trucks.
Yeah.
This is this will not accommodate with the standard, City of Raleigh garbage truck that we think of.
Okay,
But they would either,
I
I'm
got you.
assuming in a community like this dumpsters would be an option, but that doesn't, we're not designing for that. We don't anticipate that an HOA would want to do that. So if it was a private company, they would use smaller trucks.
Gotcha. And then my other question is about the fire department access to that last townhome. I'm buying that last townhome closest to the basketball goal again.
Right.
How does the fire department get there?
We've asked them that, and they've come back and said they would pull their trucks halfway down and pull out the hoses. It's within, they said, as long as it's within 150 feet of the right-of-way, they find that acceptable and meets their standards. If you'd like, we could get an email from them confirming that. So they said this works, and that's why 4 is the magic number.
So when they back up, they'll just halfway back up to leave?
Is 120
Or can they
feet
go
where
up?
they can, they would go in and then they
Yeah,
can
they-
back up.
Oh, they can go in and go back
Yeah.
up?
It's really,
So-
the issue for the fire department is really more the fire hose length than the truck turning around, because they can just back in and out, but.
Right.
This will be wide enough for 2 cars,
It should,
So,
maybe
Yeah.
not 2 large.
so in
fire
other
trucks,
words,
but-
the fire department said this meets their standards, so everywhere else in Raleigh, everywhere else in this area, in Wake County, that number is 150 feet. This number is actually a little less than that.
so I have a question then.
Yeah.
So a fire department based on this, a fire truck would have to go in and back out, which says to me, a garbage truck is not that big, as big as a fire truck, but if they did use the same garbage that we have, they would have to go pull in and back out.
Right, and for that reason, that's why we suggested all the garbage can pickup is on the public street. So yes, the people that are 100 feet down here would roll their cans out,
That's gonna look ugly.
and,
Not that disabled 80-year-old.
Thank you.
and if that,
That's what I was going to say.
well, that I think is a legitimate question. And so we're trying to find this balance of what works for the street, what works for the entire town, and is it better for everybody to drive into their garbage cans every garbage day if it were on a public street, or can we find something else?
Okay, and so, man, I lost my question that quick.
And I think that if there's a lot of ways within the HOA documents to say, this house has to pull your garbage, you take your garbage out, or you make arrangements within the HOA if someone is disabled to say, we will help you do that.
That's too much.
That's a lot.
No,
You-
no, no,
You know,
no.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
So
that's
my
not
question
realistic.
is,
But that is possible.
did I read somewhere that this is the first of this kind, or is this somewhere else?
It exists in different places and different names, but for Rolesville, this would be the first of its kind.
We know in
Here in this
Roseville it
area.
will be.
Where in this area? In Raleigh, North Carolina, within driving distance? Is this somewhere, where is this that you are aware
The
of?
private access easements for
Like this
frontage.
one?
I don't know.
I think when I asked you this question last time, you said it was the first.
I think,
I said
yeah.
I said it was it's permissible under ordinances of several other.
No, I don't think you said that, but you said.
But
it
I
was
think
the first.
for,
Did you bring examples from other municipalities?
yeah, we couldn't find any.
You couldn't find any.
See, and that's what you
No,
alluded to.
hold on,
Yeah.
of specific projects. I can bring the ordinances.
I just asked if you had any. I was just asking.
No,
I don't have those with me, but I know that I've done a lot
There-
of land use in this area. and-
there are other towns that have something similar to this, but looking at these easements as a combined pair, where you have the 4 easements that we're looking at, garbage, water, sewer, and stormwater, and a pedestrian pocket together, this makes it a bit new.
Gotcha. So why don't you make it so you can turn around? Why that little strip? I just feel like it's creating a safety hazard.
Me too.
Well, we asked the fire department if it was, and they said it wasn't.
But no, that doesn't answer the question. Why not?
Why not?
Yeah, because my concern is the garbage truck pulling in and those little kids playing out in the street and them having to back out. Because we don't know what kind of garbage they're gonna have. We don't know if they're gonna have private garbage, city garbage, or whatever.
Sure, but I mean, you
Well,
could
I mean-
also have, if you go back to the Hedingham slide, I mean, that's, as a parent, I certainly would want to have my kids playing there rather than on a street at Hedingham with garbage. So what we tried to do is, that's to avoid kind of a concrete parking lot. This T intersection, it meets the parking requirements for visitor parking, but again, this is not a through street. So in reality, those kids are going to be able to use that as a basketball court much more often than it's a park, rather, it's a,
Visitor park.
it's kind of a recreation area with parking rather than a parking lot with a basketball hoop, if that makes sense.
I feel you gave the worst example by using Hedingham because the houses you showed, to me, they were duplexes more so than they were townhomes. And the street is very crowded.
Well,
But-
a duplex is,
This is 4, that's 2, that's all I'm saying, in that aspect.
yeah, so this would
That's
even be more, I mean, the
But how
other
many,
example,
do you get more houses in this way?
No, we don't.
no.
Really?
Oh,
What-
my same question.
And so the
My same
purpose is just to make it look cleaner? I mean, like, I get the 4 attributes you mentioned
Well, it's just,
pertaining to
honestly,
Raleigh.
it's what the market, this is just a much more desirable product.
But where, if it's never been done here? How's that desirable? I'm really tired of seeing townhouses, to be honest, but that's not the point of this conversation. But how is this a more desirable neighborhood?
Because
It gives us the 4
Right.
big things. One, it reduces the conflict between the driveway and the public street. So that conflict means you don't back out into traffic worried about things. 2, it reduces the conflict between you and garbage cans and everything else. 3, it gives a place for children to play that has very limited traffic. And 4, it gives you that pocket park in the front. So those are the benefits that this system gives compared to anything else that we see.
But you
The
can't do this
reason why
without
it's
the
only
public-
4 is because when we talk to the fire department.
I get it, but
And also, this site only, the way the geometry of this site is, we only could fit 4. If it was more than 4, then there'd be a legitimate turnaround to make all that work better.
I guess just using a private easement
Private easement is
is the touchy part for me.
Yeah, and you've mentioned that before, and we know there's an example in town of a private easement that makes everyone very unhappy. And so what we're saying here, in order for that to work, it might be the, quote, same words, but the form of it has to be a front easement and a back easement. There's 2 easements, and they're a pair. And this design only works with these 2 as a pair.
Have the same concern. I feel like that's a safety hazard that you're creating there for the fire department, as well as even though they said what they said, they could get to that unit at the end, but for the garbage, that's a whole issue. But my question is, and maybe you have it in your packet, we don't. Do you have an aerial view of this? Because you said some of the townhomes would be like this, but others would not. Do you have that view?
Well, again, we'd say this is just a text change.
Yeah, I was
So
trying to
this
avoid
is-
talking about our project specifically.
We don't want
but
to
I
talk
can-
about our site plan?
On October 3rd, I'm happy to
Okay.
give you examples showing, because this design works in part of this site, but there's other parts that it's more
And
traditional.
I guess back to the other issue of this being a dead-end street. If the street needed to be longer, we would then have put a cul-de-sac bubble on there. And that goes back to your subdivision ordinance and the fire department and the TRC reviews, which we've already been through for the past 9 months, in which these streets then get longer with a big bubble at the end to make the turnaround safer and cleaner and all that. So
And
instead
what
of
was the problem with that?
Land constraints?
Yeah, on
What
this
was the
site, it's
problem
only
with
4.
that? I didn't hear. I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
hear.
there's no problem. It's, if you're concerned that there's no turnaround space, if it gets longer, then there'd be room for that turnaround space. But here, there isn't room
Yeah, the
enough
trade-off, we're trying to avoid, we don't want to go
beyond,
beyond 4 units, even though we could go up to 8. If we go farther, then we would have to, it's basically just more street, more concrete to have a big turnaround in the cul-de-sac, so
or,
the width becomes significantly,
Oh,
be-
you'd lose house count too, right?
yeah,
Because I
and
use
then
that,
it
yeah.
becomes more of an alley in a block. So you drive through this and end up back on a public street.
yeah,
If it's
with this
more
design, I mean,
than,
this is a.
if it's more than
really
4
just for
units.
those 8 units.
Can you guys do me a favor?
Yeah?
Sure.
I'm visual, but I can only hear one person at a time.
Okay.
And every time I ask a question, both of you jump in.
Gotcha.
So I need you guys to kind of tag team and one of you answer at a time, please, so I can understand what you're saying.
Understood.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
And my question was, what's the problem with doing that? You were explaining it, but you were both talking, so I didn't really hear your answer.
The concern you had was why is there no turnaround at the end of these 4 units?
Correct.
The short answer is we sent this design throughout the TRC committee, Raleigh Utilities, Fire Department, NCDOT, and the comments back to us that staff has on record said this is acceptable because it's within the minimum standard for the fire department. If the block goes longer than this amount, then a turnaround would be needed. Or if it's 8 units, then the other end of that alley would be a public street. So there would always be a way out in that
So
sense.
we're trying to avoid, we
Does that-
don't want it to be any kind
Does
of.
that answer your question? Or am I making it more confusing?
I have one question.
Not really, but I'll come back.
If I could just add one more point to, if we did go ahead, say if we put sort of a cul-de-sac bulb on that, we would still have to account for parking. So you'd still have these kind of unsightly visitor parking lots kind of scattered throughout the community. So this design allows us to make that space much more multifunctional.
So where do visitors park? You raised another question for me.
There's the 2 spots on
The
the
code
2 spots on
required.
the end.
So
At the
is-
basketball
Those
court?
2
is-
spots?
Is this how the LDO is being written, so that all of these are looking like that, or is that just your neighborhood?
That's just our neighborhood.
Well,
Okay.
2 spots for 8?
No, I think it's outside of
So the town attorney has a couple questions.
Commissioner Sneed is already on the track. So the important thing in all of this is that the board can absolutely love your design, but in terms of the work session agenda, it's to write a single ordinance that would apply to every property owner in the town and in the ETJ. So in this case, given your geographic constraints, you have 4 units. However, the next applicant will place, for example, a hammerhead at the end of the private drive, and they then could go 7 units, 4 and 3,
They would,
under the ordinance.
So the ordinance is,
they would have to have some type of turnaround.
They'd have to
That
meet
would-
all the other requirements.
that would
So
go
a
through
fire
the
apparatus
TRC.
road turnaround approved under the fire code
Yes.
would allow much longer,
Yes,
not 120 as we have here, but essentially double or double minus 1 townhome units. So 4 plus 3 could be the length of this max. That's the way the LDO amendment is written, which is really the only thing the board needs to consider today. Because you may love this. What you might not love is the next proposal. Same thing with the front-to-front requirement. This design would commit to front-to-front, back-to-back. But some jackleg developer with different geography and different cost concerns might not have that interest. I searched the LDO and I didn't find that as a requirement in the LDO language. Right? That's not a requirement of the LDO text amendment. That's just a commitment that this project is making, correct?
the commitment, that's where the access easements come into play. So we have the rear access with water and sewer and the front with stormwater. So those access, in other words, at the TRC level, that's where that gets reviewed for that. To answer your question, that I guess maybe we could ask staff on that, but the issue there is there's more than just the town LDO that, or UDO that comes into play here. It's City of Raleigh, it's the fire department, it's NCDOT, it's other factors that come into play. So you're also, the subdivision ordinance then also kicks in for Rolesville. And your subdivision ordinance says that your block width lengths can only be a certain length. And so once you get to that certain level, this actually functions as an alley because it goes from public street to public street.
Well, perhaps
So
these are
that's-
questions for staff then beyond the text amendment. And that's why I'm raising it here. Front to front, back to back is not in this text change. That's not in the language that I found. And if you guys have it,
No,
that's
because
fine.
we wanted to try to craft it, we worked with Withers and Ravenel and town staff to craft the LDO text amendment to not be specific to our project or to just meet kind of what we're trying to do. So we avoided language like that. No, it is still conditional.
So then the third question is, if the board were to adopt the LDO, the market changes, y'all move on to a project in Fuquay rather than a project in Rolesville, could the next person who comes along, whose zoning happens to be right or their zoning is wrong and they come in for amendment, promise or propose now under our LDO the Granite Townhomes debacle because now it's authorized again?
It's not.
Explain that to the board.
What we're saying is there's two issues here. In order for this to work, you have to have a front access easement and a rear access easement. As a result, staff review says, this is the intent, this is the picture, this is how we will enforce it. So what keeps this from being Granite Falls is, first of all, we're saying we're separating out where the garbage cans have to go. We're separating out where the water and sewer has to go, where the water meters have to go, and your code saying we need X number of parking spaces per townhouse unit on a public street. So that's, you remember, you always have your old base doing Granite Ridge all over again. It's that simple.
And in addition, this is only applies in conditional zoning districts, so you have that overarching kind of,
So we're building, yeah, we're building.
The
in
board,
a
the
series
board
of
is always
checks.
concerned about, hey, the ordinance might not be good, but you'll be able to catch it at the rezoning and correct our bad ordinance then. Like, that's never what we want to shoot for. I know that Mike is in the audience, and I think the board would love to hear that staff has determined that the text change proposed cannot have the unintended consequences of long private streets or front to back, or granite ridge, granite crest.
No, not crest. It's not granite crest, whichever one you.
Have we cut off the risks of those sort of
It's
events?
the one behind
And
us.
then one additional question, is it in here and did I not read it about the garbage cans having to go down to the corner? Are you saying that that's in here? Or is that gonna be an HOA thing? Because I don't remember reading that. And if I did, I must have skipped over that part.
No, it's not in,
Okay.
it's not in the text change because that's
Preference to the neighborhood.
to the neighbor, and who knows what's going to happen in 10 years.
Right.
Maybe these things go away altogether and there's another way to collect garbage.
And you know what, I will say that the quarter parking, 2.25 per townhome, 2 parking spots per 8 homes, where's the additional parking expected to happen? Because it's going to happen. That doesn't offer enough options for guests to have parking.
You have
It's gonna create another
you have 2 spots in the driveway plus the garage.
Right, I'm not talking about the homeowner, I'm talking about guests.
That's
not
that's
enough
your
parking.
code.
That's what we
All of
currently
your
have.
code.
For 2 for 8?
2.25 parking spaces per unit.
Per townhome.
Per townhome only.
So in these, you have the driveways, we're not allowed to use the garage as a parking space.
Correct.
So it's a 1-car garage with a 2-car garage.
Two spaces for parking, correct, but that's not what's
Like guest
currently
parking
taking
isn't
place.
called
Yeah,
out? I
yeah.
thought we talked about that before, because we had that same issue
With
when.
the townhouses behind the post office.
The new edition of the townhouses that we
Correct.
had.
But
Remember?
we want
we-
to stay specific with just the text amendment, not that design right now either, though.
No,
Yeah.
but I'm saying for guest
Where's it gonna
parking,
go?
period, on townhouses, I'm referring to our LDO.
Okay.
Yeah,
Does it say anything about that?
yes, it does. It's section.
I was actually asking our staff,
I'm sorry.
if you don't mind.
No.
Do we have anything called out on that, Michael?
Sure, the LDO section for parking has a standard, and it's 2.25
.25.
per dwelling unit.
But
per townhome
nothing
dwelling
on
unit.
guest parking.
The .25 is basically there to account for guest parking in a cumulative nature.
So it's 0.25 per unit.
Yes. So each of their 4-unit buildings,
There's your 2 spaces.
4 quarters, 1 whole, and that's the 1 parking space.
Okay, so I know there was a conversation
building for
about
extra.
the townhomes behind the post office and the parking for that. And I remember something came up about the police, Rolesville police coming back there while people were parked on the side of the street or what have you. All I'm saying is going to happen, whether that's what the UDO, LDO says. That's a problem that we're looking at already. So between the trash cans and the 2 spots and the way these townhomes are positioned, we're walking into that. It's going to be automatic. So the Rolesville Police Department does not have time to be going over there handling calls about cars illegally parked on the streets. And I say that because just the way this whole thing is set up, to me, it's just a problems waiting to happen. I understand your point and the purpose of how you're situating the townhomes, but I just don't think that's a product that Rolesville is ready for.
So can we get Mike up here to tell us about what this is about? Can we do that?
Are we talking about parking ratios? Are we talking about
this-
garbage
these-
cans?
these Amendments that are being
Yes.
proposed. What does this do for Rolesville? And it looks like the staff has taken a lot of time to look through, and with the help of the developer, to look through to find out every place in our LDO that these changes are going to affect Rolesville. So are there any drawbacks to what's being proposed aside from their project? Let's take their project out of this because that's not what we're
Right,
talking
right,
about tonight.
right.
What in here what is staff's opinion on what this does for Rolesville?
Sure. It adds an option
Yes,
for more creative development of townhomes.
okay. Now, taken into what we have seen here, aside from their developments, the width of the streets, is all of that outlined in here, and is that gonna be the same issue with other developments that is gonna be here, with the fire trucks and all of that, is that in here?
All of that will be the same as townhomes that are built under the LDO today or yesterday.
Okay. That's my question.
Yeah, we're
So
not making
all those same considerations are all the same. There's no cutting corners with this text amendment for townhomes by any means.
So the question I have is, with the example you have up on there right now, we have the Carlton Point townhouses. And I know at one point, I believe those are all public roads.
They are.
That road goes down, that hammerhead's required for turnaround. So how is this different? Is it just because it's a private road, those will become parking spots instead of an actual hammerhead turnaround at the end?
I've got some slides of that particular
Okay.
neighborhood. Would you like me to
Yeah.
bring them up? Oops, sorry, pardon me.
Granite Ridge is the townhomes. I'm trying to think of the name.
This is the towns of Carlton Point. That is a public street you see there. Let me see my cursor. That is a public street, correct. There are small hammerhead-ish turnaround spaces
Right.
there that look like, much like the applicant's drawings. Now, at the moment, I do not know the exact length of this block, which, sorry, before we get to the, I have a picture of the plat. This is a head down, so I'm on one of those hammerhead ends looking down. That's what those public streets look like, all the driveway cuts. They have sidewalk on both sides. The front areas where the parking pads, et cetera, the amount of grass you can see, just for example. All right, this is an aerial view. Luckily, before the buildings went in, but when the streets were paved, you can see the concrete curbs and all that, so this is full paved widths there, so you can see that. So my pictures were right here, looking down James Croft Way. And then here's the subdivision plat. So this is a public 50-foot right-of-way. There are those turnarounds. They have fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 22-ish foot townhome lots plus a 30-foot space in between. If someone were to do the math, I think that's well over 150 foot. So that, in and of itself, again, from my knowledge of the fire code, would say that there needs to be a means of turnaround for the truck, unless Wake County Fire decided that it's not that far over 150 and they could back up on this. Maybe well, it's not even, I won't go there yet. So that is a difference between what the applicant is showing in their concept drawing and what they understand is the depth or length of that before they would have to do a circle or a larger turnaround for the large vehicles. So not apples to apples between this and that. But in some practical ways, they look very similar.
Right.
But I think this road is much longer than there.
But it's just as wide as the other one that,
The actual physical pavement, yes. They will absolutely be unnoticeable, unknowingly different. One is a public right-of-way, the other would be a private access easement. On
Is there
paper.
guest parking in this one?
There is, let me go backwards. So this development went with a larger common parking lot. Their mail kiosk is out in this area as well. That's how they tackled their communal. Again, the way that it's oriented, that's central to all of the units equally, as opposed to some other developments. Again, every development could be different. You would not want to put a satellite parking, 2,000 feet from a dwelling unit. You try to put them in common, easily reachable areas. And this tiny little, subdivision did it with that. Again, doesn't lend itself to every development. Everyone will be case by case as to where they put their.
How many townhomes are there?
I do not know that
I
answer off
think
the top
it's
of my
like
head, ma'am.
54, 53.
Something like that, right? 50,
Hey,
51.
Commissioner Sutton, the reason with our design, we're able to avoid a parking lot is because we're putting one of the required 2.25 spaces in each driveway.
I got you.
Still not good.
We specifically wanted to avoid that community parking lot for a variety of reasons. One, it becomes kind of space of no man's land that no one knows it's there. And so if you're at a party and you want to visit someone, you have to go into that parking lot no matter what. And then walk out, down the street, 400 or 500 feet to your guest place. So we wanted to make these streets much more intimate, much more neighbor-friendly, and that's why tying the parking spaces to each 4 units meets the intent of the code and also doesn't create that big common parking lot, which we don't want to see.
This
I think it's more convenient, though.
what is?
The larger parking
Oh,
lot
having
versus 2 spaces for every 8 townhomes.
That's your code. That
I
parking
know
lot
it's
is
the
only
code.
big
I know
enough
it's the
for
code.
50.
Would you consider putting a turn in at the end of each of those streets versus the T?
Let's ask them that.
I want to know.
So
how
you
the
won't
T
have the
got
parking then? You won't meet the parking requirement?
Exactly.
I just, we're talking about their rezoning project now, and not the
Let's-
text amendment.
So we want a text change that would,
I know.
or we don't want. We either do want or we do not want a text change that would permit private streets. So if we do want to have a limited right of private streets, and any of the features that have been referenced by the petitioner today sound like the sort of conditions you would want to have on such a right, then they need to work their way into the LDO in some way. Either staff has determined that other provisions already do it, or it needs to be added. For example, well, the one thing that we like about what these folks intend to do is these idea of pods where it's front, back. The applicant says, well, for us, that's really the only way this could work. Well, I would suggest to you, if that's what you always want to see, it should make its way into the LDO, into text change. Similarly, if the applicant says, well, we're trying to do an intimate idea with relatively short private streets, then if you did a text change, your text change should incorporate a limit on the length of your private streets, rather than leaving it wide open to whatever the next person wants to do. Because you will be surprised, because the market will find a way to take advantage of whatever it is you approved to maximize the site.
Yeah, and what we try to do is we try to be cognizant of not craft the LDO to our specific project. I mean, I'd certainly be willing to add all of those requirements, but we, you know, in conjunction with staff, we didn't kind of make it specific to our project. But if those are concerns, you know, that's kind of the purpose of the work session. If those are concerns that you all want to see addressed, we're happy to work to craft language to address those concerns.
I just see so many developments coming in looking just like this. I mean, we need other products besides townhomes anyway. And I think we're almost limiting ourselves to the possibility of developers coming to us with something besides changing up our LDO to allow for this type of project versus offering other types of.
Well, as proposed, this is an option. The way it is currently done is still available. This does not eliminate one idea and go to another idea.
Get that.
Okay.
I'm just saying the design of this one.
Well,
I just-
again, let's not talk about the design of this one, but rather the
concept
text change.
As to what he's explaining to us of what it's going to be. I'm not saying exactly that, but it's going to look something similar to this, correct?
No.
Yeah, but all we're doing
Yes.
is, we're amending the LDO to add another tool and a design option for future developers. It doesn't require townhomes to do this. It's just adding another option. Staff has, you know, supported it. In the comment, staff was the one that, you know, that initiated the idea of a text amendment to address this issue. You know, we think it's safer and more aesthetically pleasing, so that's why we're here.
I would just like to see it. I know it solves some issues, but it also creates new issues. Garbage cans is one for me. I get the .25, 2 cars per 8. I get that, but I think that's still going to create another problem, but that's out of your control. I get that based on the LDL. This is not a project that I'm
But
in
this,
favor
but
of.
not the project, but this is only about the private easement,
Right.
the private access.
Yeah, that's the
Correct.
point. There's no garbage discussion,
None of that.
I get that.
doesn't
Not-
change it, so,
I get it, but just thinking about what you said though, how's that gonna work? That's not a part of this conversation, but it was discussed in this conversation.
Every townhome has garbage issues. Everybody's got a rollout. It has to go to a public street. It has to get picked up. If the text amendment were to include a requirement for a dumpster be installed on every private access easement, maybe it would go where the goalpost, or the basketball goal, then the house closest to the public street would have to carry their garbage bags and put it in the dumpster. So it's just trash is an inherent of living in a community. I was also going to raise the point, folks can subdivide lots into very large lots. They can place their house hundreds of feet from the public street. They have to roll their garbage cans down to the public road to get them picked up. So that's a personal choice of that home builder. So trash is just an inherent factor of residential living.
And maybe different for every single project that comes under this.
Absolutely.
private easement
Exactly,
access.
so that's,
Absolutely.
we're hesitant to add anything specific to garbage collection because we're trying to find something that can apply to all
It
circumstances.
doesn't matter, it's fine. You have 4 other people here that can vote for it as well as me.
So we're not going to vote on this tonight, but I'd like to see if anyone and everyone could give them guidance on what you'd like to see change, if there's anything you'd like to change.
I would like to see a video. I'd like to see where this is happening at, where this is built out already. That's what I would like to see,
Yeah, but you need to,
right? I'd like to see where it's done.
I think that goes more along the lines of what the development's going to look like. I think we need to go,
I want to see something like this. It doesn't have to be this exact
Right.
You
picture
just want to see a private
Yes.
easement access road.
that's done.
There are many communities that permit private streets for townhomes.
There's one in Wake Forest.
That's both the blessing and the curse of this. You'll notice that my comments have been probably completely different than your concerns. This text change does not require this, let's say, excellent design. That is, an excellent land planner has come up with a design that gives you safer pocket park, intimate, removing heavy traffic from the front yards of these townhomes. That, as best I can determine, is not a requirement of this text change.
Correct.
It's a requirement of what this high-quality developer will do as part of their proposal. And that's why I keep coming back to it.
Good point.
So that can be a requirement, though.
What I need, that I have not heard yet, and it's probably going to be from staff, did this text request go through the planning board already?
Yes, it did.
And what was the planning board's feedback?
It was unanimous. Well, I don't know the vote count, but it was supported. I do not remember it being a recommendation for denial.
It was supported, you said?
Yes.
I believe there was
I would have
one
to check the record.
I think it
no.
was a 4-to-1 vote.
4-to-1, if I recall.
And do we know, I always ask this question, if there's an outlier, do we know the feedback from the person that did not go for it?
I certainly can't speak for him. I think he was generally against townhomes in general, so anything about
And
townhomes
I'll
was.
say, Commissioner Sutton, the waters were a little muddier because it was the text change, the annexation, and this project that were before the planning board. So I will say, I don't think his opposition was related to the language of the text amendment. I think it was more project-specific and
I think that muddied the water a little bit today from the understanding of what the text amendment is about with the drawings of your development there. I think it confused it some today.
yeah, and if it helps, I mean, we can go through the actual language to show.
I read it, I'm okay.
Yeah, I think we've all read it. My concern, Paul had asked for us to state kind of what we'd like to see. I just don't like that end of the street issue. I think that's an issue, and I don't know how it got past us on the other one. I don't like that. And I don't even see how it happened in other development. I know we're not talking about that, but Carlton Point townhomes. And I don't know length, I don't know measurement, but to me, that presents a safety issue. So that's my biggest concern. And I already talked about garbage. I think we've talked about garbage a lot.
Commissioner Sutton, can I ask how would you want that changed?
I just think it needs to be a way to turn around. I think that creates a safer area.
roundabout?
So-
Not a
so
roundabout,
that
but
gives
just
me
like
the
a bulb.
question, is her question related to your design or related to the LDO? It's just the design, correct?
But he's saying for the private easement to have that end like that, right?
It's more a function of this design because we talked to the fire marshal. The other options we had were that would then terminate into a public street as an option. So there are other options available. In this specific case, that is as long as it can be without a full turnaround circle or a connection to a public street.
So would you
Does that
consider
make
a
sense?
full turnaround circle then?
don't understand. I don't know why I don't understand.
Yes, I mean, yes or no,
I
or,
mean, that is a design question for their rezoning concept plan. For the text amendment,
It's just the private easement.
it's creation of private easements, the length of which would be governed by the block length standard that applies to any new public or private access easement street created, or fire code.
so again, if you make it a turnaround, if you put something up there where you can turn around, it changes from private to public?
No, ma'am.
Street?
No.
No, ma'am.
The text amendment doesn't speak to the turnaround.
No.
Oh,
No.
so then
That's
that's
more of a
still, that's still
design
my
issue.
question then.
So length of a private access easement would be driven by either block length maximum or fire code minimum length before you have to add a turnaround for the fire
Right, so
vehicles.
it would extend that, the length,
Text amendment doesn't change it. It's 150 feet.
so you can't, so it
Right.
can't be done.
Whether it's a private street or a public street, it can't be
Can't be done.
It can't be done longer than 150 feet without a
Gotcha.
full
Without a full circle.
turnaround for a
Right,
fire truck.
right. And this private access easement could not be longer. I do believe the number is 1,200 foot before it tees into or intersects with another street.
And that would defeat the purpose of the tax amendment for this.
No, no. The text amendment is just to give the option to design private access easements in lieu of public streets. Their
Right.
project in this location
Right.
is choosing to do short streets, if you will, short private access
But what I'm
easements.
saying is that if you were to do a turnaround, then it would defeat the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish tonight with the tax amendment.
In some ways, but
You follow? I mean-
it would increase their costs.
Okay,
But they would also be able to line that street right there with an 8-unit building, for
Yeah,
instance.
I think the text
And if
amendment
that's what they
would
wanted.
allow us to choose either option. But the text amendment doesn't give us or take away either option, if that makes sense.
okay. All right, thank you.
If we went longer than 150 feet, if it's public or private, doesn't matter, we'd still have to upgrade the turnaround. But we've chosen this design, because really, you have to remember, this is basically an elongated driveway. This is not a road where cars are gonna be going, it's not a street, it's a driveway access off of a street. So we thought that the benefit of, rather than having that turnaround that's really not gonna be used because there's no through traffic in or out, that's kind of what we were going for there.
But that's their project.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly. I'm
on
just trying to
October
answer your
3rd.
question.
Get out of here.
So, back to your question, your subdivision ordinance says your blocks have to be a minimum 400 feet up to 1,200 feet. So if this goes through, what it says is your blocks, this has to fit within your block standard that then meets all the other criteria of Rolesville, that goes through the planning board, goes through all staff review, goes through the TRC review. So that in a sense limits how long this can be, and this is the special case of how short it can be. That's it. That's what you're looking at here, is that special case of how short it is.
The text amendment is just giving another option for developers to come to us and say, this is in your LDO, and then we would like to design ours to look like this, where theirs looks like this.
Yes, and you'd still be within conditional zoning, so you could say they have to be back to back, or you have to deal with trash this way.
Or you have to have the pocket park in there.
Whatever the
or-
case may be, yeah. Those are all specific, and like I said, we didn't want to put that in there because I didn't want to look like I was crafting this for my project and my project only. So we left that out there, but kept it in a conditional zoning district, so you can add those things that are site-specific.
And in that sense, the conditional zoning requirement on this gives you, the board, extra power to review all this and says, we don't like it in the future. If you don't like something in the future, it gives the planning board something to review. It also is back to staff to say, if you apply for this conditional zoning process, it then gives another level of review for everybody. So it just can't happen overnight in that sense. And that's, I think, how we're treating this as the safeguard for the town is through the conditional zoning. Because we know conditional zoning has extra requirements, extra scrutiny by staff, extra scrutiny by the TRC, extra scrutiny by the planning board, and then eventually extra scrutiny by all of you as commissioners. And that's the power we're trying to give you through this to make it work better for everyone.
But to do it in a way that minimizes the overall amount of changes to the LDO.
I'm still confused on your 400 minimum and 1,200 maximum, because it made it sound like, well, if we put a, what did you call it, a bubble at the end of the street, then we have to do 8 townhomes.
But we could do 8.
That's what I was going to say. It didn't sound like you had to do 8. So I'm confused on that when I heard 400 and 1,200 feet.
Your UDO block length, and Mike can talk, states subdivision ordinance that it's 400 to 800 feet as a standard block. If it's less than 400 feet and more than 150, as this is showing, then there'd be a dead end and it'd be a bubble at the end. So you could turn around. Does that answer your question?
I don't know. I'm all confused. I already expressed my concerns. I'm going to let the rest of the board add what they need to add. I don't have anything else to offer.
Okay. Go ahead.
Do you have anything, Dan?
Changing the text amendment. Change it, change it or not change it does not stop a builder from coming in and building. Correct, Dave? LDO, as it's written right now, still a builder can come and still present a project on this land and still build, correct?
They can. However, we have heard from staff, I believe, and staff can confirm that the plans that have been presented were not, I'll let staff speak to it. You end up with a product that may not be great.
Feasible for the town.
Okay. Are you asking in general?
Yeah, just general.
Okay. So if a piece of property has zoning that, and we're talking about townhomes? Okay. If a land has zoning that allows the townhome use, then they can move to preliminary subdivision plat, come up with that plan, run that through TRC staff, gets approved, do construction infrastructure drawings, run those through TRC, get approved, go to construction, get building permits, record the final plat to record the lots, and then get building permits, build the townhomes, period.
You still have to meet certain
And
requirements.
that has nothing to do with the text amendment tonight. That is the standard procedure when the zoning is already in place, and there's 2 districts, RH and Town Center, that allow townhomes.
And to answer your question, Commissioner Alston, if there's nothing that, from a townhome construction standpoint, that is permitted today that will be prohibited if this text amendment goes through. This is just adding another option. It's not taking away from what's currently available.
Okay. Thank you for clarification.
But they still have requirements that they have to meet, though.
Yes, because it's under conditional.
All right.
Do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay.
The horse is dead.
Everything? All right. Town attorney, you have anything?
I do not. The board appears to be thinking about this, and so this will be back on your agenda in 2 weeks.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
All right, does the town board have anything else they'd like to discuss? Or any information for the public they'd like to share?
How about this?
No, any of this is done.
I do.
Okay.
I don't know if everyone had a chance to look at the artwork. I hope that everybody does look at it so we can have a conversation, because I have several opinions about the pieces. We can talk individually about it. But
What artwork? We were.
the murals,
Oh.
yeah, I definitely got some opinions on that. Again, we can definitely talk about it, but
Yeah, so I want to add to that. We have a mural committee meeting on Monday to discuss that as well. All the input we've got so far, so that'll be discussed, and then I can share that with the board once I get that.
Yeah, because Michael sent out something asking for our input.
Yeah.
Did everybody get a chance to look at that?
Then it was changed.
Yep.
And then he
Yeah.
changed it
Changed
to
it.
some additional things.
Right.
Did you see the changes?
oh, I did.
Okay, is there something you want to share?
I mean, sure, I just don't feel it really not all the pictures really represents Rolesville. I feel the first picture is way too busy. I don't understand it. When I seen it, someone else had saw the picture as well. How does that represent the one that's slated to go in the front on the right-hand side? I just think that's really busy and what it's supposed to be. I'm not, please understand, I'm not saying the artwork is bad. I'm just saying I don't feel like it really represents Rolesville. And it's just too, I think it's very busy. He had originally in the park, it was maybe a bee, flower. I thought that was really nice. But me personally, I thought maybe we have a pollinator garden. Something should represent the pollinator garden to enhance that. And I did mention that I didn't feel like culturally it didn't really represent children in a park. It represented more of the nature part, which was part of the directions he was given. So I had suggested make it more diverse, put children out there. I really and truly feel that just having the one brown-skinned girl on the side of the building does not represent who Rolesville is. We're more than just a brown-skinned girl playing in the park. I feel there should be more kids, more diverse kids, girl, boy, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever, but something to really indicate who's playing in that park. I felt it was a little bit of an easy way out to put the brown girl on the building. So that to me does not represent Rolesville. And then there was a part where we had initially the one hand and the tobacco seedling. First of all, I thought the hand, well, I just felt like, I know that for some people, growing tobacco, harvesting it, what have you, brings good memories to them. I don't think that that location and what has happened in that area, I don't think that hand or the two hands, especially the brown hand and the white hand together, I get the unity showing the seedling of the tobacco plant, because the majority of the people that were out there, and I'm guessing on this, were not white people out there picking the tobacco. It was more black. And does that raise fond memories? Maybe for some people it does, but not, I don't think that's something that somebody who was new coming to Rolesville would want to see. As one person, I'm saying that. But I do understand that some people are very proud of, what their families grew and survived on, how they lived. But to me, that doesn't represent in that location. I mean, that location is going to have a lot of things going on. The building, the retail, the commercial, the new town center, or, right down the street. How does the tobacco plant represent that moving forward? So I don't get that. So that's my concern. But definitely for the park, that one girl to me was not on the mark at all for just putting one little brown girl. And I don't know if it's because I said something that you're going to put a brown girl on the building to appease me. That's not the point of what I was saying. We have many children that play in that park, and they're not all brown-skinned girls. So that doesn't really represent to me. So that was my concern. But then going back to over here, you said it was tobacco leaves?
I didn't know it until I read that,
Yeah, I
and it
looked
made
it up.
sense to
Right.
me.
So I was like, what are the pink flowers? And I
Yeah.
was like,
Right.
oh, they're tobacco flowers. I didn't
Yeah.
realize.
To me, I'm like, okay, tobacco. I get this is what Rolesville was. We're looking at what Rolesville is becoming. Not trying to forget where we came from. I understand that part. But to me, you have I don't know how many beds of the pollinator garden out there. And you don't have to use the idea, but why not put that bumblebee that's no longer existing, that's on the plant, somewhere over there to represent that this is a pollinator garden?
See, I liked it in the park because I was like, that's nature, it's fun for the kids. That's why I liked that bee there. That's what I thought there.
And I thought that was a good idea, but then I'm looking at who else is in it. We have that, and I agree with you. But we have that here because sometimes when you look at the pollinator garden, and you know I'm like not really, we talked about this. Let's let some people, because somebody said to me, and I guess they had the mindset like I did when it comes to pollinator gardens, oh my God, they're gonna cut the grass? But they didn't understand that it was a pollinator garden. And I'm not saying if you change that to bees and butterflies, but I think that's more representative of the pollinator garden. But I can still see the bumblebee and whatever at the park, but kids play in the park. When you go to the park, you want to see, do you want to see the kids or do you want to see that? Maybe, I don't know, it can go either way.
Yep.
So, but that
Right.
was just too hard to figure out. I'm like, I'm not trying to take a test, trying to figure out what I'm looking at.
You know what? I've been in other towns where they've had murals and I didn't understand them and I had to read about theirs as
That's what
well.
I was gonna say.
So I was like, okay, then that's okay. I guess that's a thing in the art world where you have to do that. So when I read that and I was like, okay, I get it. I'm okay with that.
And just like I said earlier, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an attorney. I'm somewhat artsy, but not an artist truly, professionally. So I think he takes all of that input and tries to give an output.
Correct.
And it's not always going to be in your face. Some of it will be. Sometimes it's not. Like I had to look up that tobacco flower because I kept saying, what is the deal with the pink flowers? I've never seen pink tobacco flowers. And then I was like, oh, I get it. But also, like April said, you have to stop to look stuff up. So it creates a curiosity. So that to me is part of probably the creative process. But I did mention the same thing about I didn't see multiculturalism even in the first draft, was not even there at all. So maybe give feedback on the park situation.
And even if he is going to leave, and it's to me, it's just so busy. I told Paul that to me, it looked like something under the sea. I was thinking of The Little Mermaid when I saw everything on there, because again, I didn't see, if they're going to put something up there, like some words in a frame, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's fine, but is everyone really going to stop to go to that end of the building to see what that is? Is that, if that's what the goal is, to have people stop or to research like the two of you did, how many people are really going to do that? You want something like it does grab your attention, but you want it to grab their attention and them to appreciate what they're seeing. I don't feel those two hands on the building does that.
And see, for me, those two hands, when I looked at them, I thought, okay, that's slave
Yeah.
hands, and they're the ones that built the foundation of Rolesville in a way.
Yeah, I like
So
the
I really
combination
like
too,
that.
yeah.
To me, it's a memory of who was out there picking it. That's how I see, and we're looking
But
at
it
it from different
honors-
perspectives. We're looking at it
honors
from
both,
different
because there are
perspectives.
white people that pick tobacco too.
Correct, and I
Right,
said
so
that
I think
to
it
him, right?
honors both
And I
in
did
that
say that to
respect.
him, but I'm like, if you're riding through Roseville, okay, so you're looking at new people coming into Roseville looking at that, but you also have the people who are from Roseville looking at that. So what are you trying to capture? You know, that
Roseville.
history or something new? Because that whole intersection is going to be
Is new. All that's new. And this speaks to the old.
It speaks to the legacy. But I was going to ask
sure.
Paul, have you guys talked about, here I go back to signage. You know, some type of sign that does explain it, because it's
That's
a
what I-
teachable.
that's what I was
There's
just
going to be
saying
a
to
sign
him.
with each one of them.
Oh, well, there you go.
Right.
It'll explain
Yeah,
kind of.
we're looking at QR codes and everything for those.
Oh, yeah. So there you go, right
I'm like,
there.
And
unless you're
I
gonna
also
that
want to
up
put
there-
out too, hopefully, this is a project right now that we're just kicking off for murals for the town, but hopefully it's a future endeavor as well.
Yeah.
Like we're going to add to them, add more around town and stuff, everything else, just to kind of add more to it.
And it's going to
so.
be there for 5 years, right?
Right.
Oh, my God.
So I will give them, like I said, they have your input already, but I will give them the input from tonight. The only other thing I want to share is, if you get a chance, look on page 51. This is more for the public's input. I had mentioned in our last meeting that there were some updates and everything else for Parks and Rec. There's also an update on the farm entrance on there. So if you get a chance, take a look at that. There was some, looks like greenway stuff and everything else too. So just want to give an update that that's actually out there of what we have going on. And
I was going to
April.
ask about that.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to add on to something, because Dan didn't say anything. What were your thoughts? You're good with as is?
No, I had seen it in the finance report, how much we had spent to date, and I was just going to ask where we were on it, but,
Okay.
yeah.
On the artwork.
Yeah. Oh, well, I primed tobacco growing up. That's how I worked during the summer, so I grew up farming.
So you knew what it was right
I
away?
knew what it was right away when I saw it. But since I have the mic right now, September 23rd, this Saturday, at Arise, 300 South Town Circle here in Rolesville. It would be the Rolesville Veterans group meeting, Coffee with a Veteran. So thank you, Arise, for having that. That would be at 9 a.m. to 10, followed by a question and answer with Master Sergeant retired Jerry Magnum hosting it. Thank you.
And that's our regular date.
That's
It's just
our a monthly regular
Because
meeting
the
right
first
there.
one with Deborah Ross was,
Yeah.
Congresswoman Deborah Ross.
Yes, ma'am.
Was something that she had asked if we would be willing to, could we accommodate that? Because she was going to be in DC and wouldn't be able to come to this one.
April, you have anything to add?
I don't think anything additional. No.
Town attorney? Town manager? All right, I'll entertain a motion to,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Not bad, it's still before 9 o'clock.